Hello, everybody, and happy birthday to everybody who's been with Midwestern Marx from the beginning, or happy anniversary, maybe I should say. This is the third year. Today marks the third year that the Midwestern Marx Institute has been around, pumping out theoretical education, learning, studying, educating, agitating along with you all. So there's no way, of course, that we would have made it 3 years or that we would have reached the size we have without everyone in the audience. So thank you all so much. And this stream is really about answering your questions, celebrating our third year, and saying thank you to the audience for standing with us through all this. Because, I mean, there's been a lot that's happened. Carlos and I have both had our jobs attacked by crazy people online. I even ended up losing my job. And we've had 7 of our TikTok accounts permanently banned, permanently wiped off the face of the earth. But we've kept going, we've kept growing, and right now we're bigger than we ever have been. So that's something to celebrate. If you ask me, Marxism, Leninism is growing in popularity in the U.S. The class struggle is rebounding. And yeah, that's what our institute's all about. So we'll get into the stream right after our introduction.
And we're back. Hello, everyone. I am so excited about tonight. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone, you're probably sick of hearing me say this at this point, but please, please, please like the stream, subscribe if you're not, hit the notification bell. We get suppressed in that algorithm, LAMF. So it really, really does help. If you want to help us out a little bit more, patreon.com/Midwestern Marx. Or go to Buy Me a Coffee. We have a selfie store, blah, blah, blah. On to the show.
Absolutely. Full disclosure, the Buy Me a Coffee right now, because we use that for our iPad fundraiser, that is hooked up to my bank account. So if you want to donate to the project, go to Patreon or YouTube. But yeah, excited to be here. Carlos, did you figure out what LAMF means yet? I saw
Oh, you saw my face? Yeah, I was trying to decipher it because my mind went to LMAO, and I was like, but I was able to understand it with the context, and knowing spirit is not cursing.
Hold on a second. If you Google LAMF, I wonder if it comes up.
I think you might have just made it up on the spot. Honestly, I've never.
Urban Dictionary. The abbreviation LAMF means like a motherfucker, and it comes from Johnny Thunders, an old punk rock guy. So it's like before texting acronyms. Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers, who I still love, they had an album called LAMF.
I like a little bit of history behind the text acronym. This comment, Joey C. Happy birthday, comrades. Before I found Midwestern Marx, I was watching Phil DeFranco. Wow, that's wild. There's nothing I like to hear more than that we turned someone to socialism or we introduced them to Marxism or something like this, where someone went from like an absolute neolib like Philip DeFranco, literally reading off cue cards from the State Department, it seems like sometimes, to watching us, to watching Midwestern Marx. And that's what we do. That's why I just have responded so much to DeFranco, because it's crazy the amount of reach that guy has, or the amount that his content is boosted, and how in line it is with the NATO U.S. State Department narrative. I actually wanted to react at some point to the recent video I did about him, if you guys are down for that on this stream. So it might give us something to discuss. But happy birthday, Professors and Eddie. Thank you very much, Sam. Coach Eddie and the Professors. That would be actually a good name for this show, low key.
Full disclosure, I'm not a professor.
Noah's a carpenter, but you guys want to react to that Phil DeFranco video? To kick it, it's only like 2 minutes.
Yeah, let's do it. I wanted to say a couple things. It's very easy to overlook like work that's done online, and to feel like, you know, what's really being done in person, and how is it translating to organizing communities. And we know from our audience that like people that have been following our work since the beginning, organized, you know, the first Starbucks unions, other Starbucks unionizing efforts. There was people in ALU, the same thing. So we've had an impact in that field. But in terms of the changing of hearts and minds, that's, even if it's just on the internet, it's such an important step for a more radical, practical transformation. It's about engaging in the war of ideas. And even though, you know, we can convince everyone on the internet about socialism and we won't have socialism the next day, it's still an important step. These are ideological fields through which hegemony is developed in modern bourgeois societies. And if we can play as best a part as we can in pushing back against the narrative and challenging it, I think that's important. And in the places where we've been the most allowed to develop, in places like TikTok, where their algorithms at one point at least allowed content that isn't just State Department BS lies to blow up. In those places, you know, we presented a form of a danger to the narrative, the dominant narratives. We had videos with, on a weekly basis, basically getting to 1 million views, and that all had to be suppressed. But it's suppressed and it's attacked, and we suffer from shadow bans and all these different things because the stuff that we do challenges the narrative and a very important field of crafting hegemony today, which is social media. With, I mean, people spend 7 to 8 hours on their phone on social media. So it's not everything in the world. We should be always focused on translating what we learn to our community organizing, to our workplace organizing, but it is an important field. And, you know, I know I speak for both of you. We're also in the process of thinking about how can we transition a lot of this work towards more direct, overseen, on the ground stuff. But it's not that this other layer of work is unimportant either.
Yeah, sure. I want to see
a couple things. You want to? Oh, sorry, I was gonna pass it to you, Noah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Eddie. I kind of
no. I'm sorry. I should have just let you go.
So I want to say a couple of things too. First, that's a really, really good point Carlos is making. It ties into something. I saw a question earlier asking if we were in the Communist Party. Absolutely. Many of us are within the staff at Midwestern Marx. I am. Eddie is a director, blah, blah, blah. But Tom Riggins, our consulting editor, has been in the party like the combined lifespan of Eddie and Carlos, right? He's lived his whole life in the party. So a lot of what we do is helping educate people so they can bring that to the Communist Party and help rebuild it into the force it needs to be in order to see us through the crises coming our way. And they are coming, make no mistake. Reproletarianization is here. It's happening. And as these crises get more acute, we're just not ready yet for that kind of, for where we need to be, for that kind of crises, right? We're just not ready. So part of what we do is educating people, giving them the Marxist way of looking at the world, and getting people to where they can do their own Marxist analysis rather than having to trust someone else. Because you know what? There are wreckers, there are right opportunists, there are liberals who may be well intentioned, but think they're communists and they're heading in the wrong direction. And so a lot of this is really meant to be put into political action. Secondly, I just want to say what an honor it's been working with you guys over the last couple of years. I wasn't here at the beginning. And when I started working for the Institute, I never thought, I knew the work we were doing would be important, but I never thought I would become such close friends with the other directors, with Eddie and Carlos. Like, I talk to these guys every single day of my life. The only other person I'm like that with is my wife and my son, and so there's more than just professionalism here. There's a lot of love between the people that work for the Institute, and I'm looking forward to many more years of that.
Absolutely, as am I. And as our buddy Kyle Pettis likes to say, everybody studies Lenin during the revolutionary period in Russia, but not enough people study Lenin during the Iskra period. If you don't know, Iskra was the political paper of the Social Democratic Labor Party, or whatever it was called. It was the socialist organ of education and political analysis. And that's where we feel like we're at in America right now, a pre-revolutionary period. The conditions for revolution, or the preconditions, are there, and we just need to, water those seeds, so to speak, and allow it to flourish eventually. But I want to get to some of the super chats here. I already got that one from Sam. Thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate all you do to support the project. This one's interesting. Why do you guys fetishize rural? Screw Jason Aldean. Apolitical idealist. I don't think you would say that if you were on my personal Facebook account. I mean, we do target rural workers, and I am from a very small town, rural community, where a lot of the people are, saying, yeah, Jason Aldean. And, I've been pointing out on my Facebook that, one, Jason Aldean's not from a small town. He lives in a mansion in Nashville. And I also made a TikTok about this. And two, he's cheering on the police, the police who have always been anti-worker and who have always acted as an armed body of the capitalist state to suppress the working class. So it's not that we're fetishizing rural workers. It's just that we're trying to reach them. We're trying to educate them. And, sometimes you got to adjust your message a little bit for rural workers in the Midwest versus, Starbucks baristas in California, by example. Both are important to reach. Both are in the working class. But maybe both aren't susceptible to the same kind of message, or aren't open to the same kind of message. So we tailor our message to the working class people that we're talking to, while still keeping our principles the same. Anyone else have anything they want to add on that? I did a video dunking on Jason Aldean too.
Yeah, let me just add, I love the question. It's like that old lawyer trick, like, have you stopped beating your wife? Like, what are you talking about? Why are you assuming we fetishize anything? We
Right.
don't. Secondly, I fully agree with that second sentence. Screw Jason Aldean and screw all fake country pop stars putting on cowboy hats, trying to trick us into thinking they're country artists. By the way, Eddie made a good point. He's praising the cops. What kind of country singer is singing about praising the cops rather than shooting cops, running from cops, being arrested, being in prison? Like, that is what you sing about in country music. You don't praise the cops. Get out of here. He should get his cowboy hat taken away at that point.
That is so true, and it feeds into the stereotype about, small towns and small communities, which is just, at least from my experience, and I've been able to traverse through about a dozen of them. When the Black Lives Matter protests were going on, there was always people in the streets Like he's trying to make the separation where it's like just as only metropolitan people or people in big cities are the ones that care about social justice or that care about state oppression or whatever the case might be, and that's just not true, man. I've seen it all around the Midwest and various states in the Midwest, in small towns, people hitting the streets protesting just the same. The dynamic might be a little different, but um, this idea that there's this inherent backwardness and conservative in the sense of like good with the status quo uh, essence in small communities is just untrue. Like people are desperate in a lot of small communities. They don't like what the existing system has done to their lives, and they're ready for something new. And whether it's protesting against a police state's murder of one of us in the form of George Floyd, or whatever it is, they're looking for alternatives because they realize from their embodied life, from their being in the world, that whatever we have right now hasn't been working, and it's not working for them, and it's certainly not going to work for their kids that are facing a very futureless future as capitalism and the empire crumbles. So this elitist myth about the people in the rural regions is bullshit, and it's reinforced through songs like Aldean's.
Yeah, I mean that's been one of the main effects that country music has had, especially since the end of or after 9/11. Before that, country music was very revolutionary, but now it's a way to get working class or rural people in the South or Midwest or wherever they listen to country music on board with imperialism, American exceptionalism, and capitalism. Like the worst song ever is Toby Keith's "Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue," where they're saying that's what America brings you, courtesy of the red, white, and blue, bombs and destruction. That's what our country's about, and cheering it on. So we don't fetishize rural workers, but we do speak to rural workers. And, just because we're called the Midwestern Marx Institute doesn't mean we're aimed at rural workers. There are actually many cities in the Midwest, such as Chicago, one of the biggest cities in the country. So
money where I'm from, Cleveland.
Right. Money is the root of all evil. Yeah, it makes me think of the song "Money" by Pink Floyd, which Roger Waters is actually re-releasing, "The Dark Side of the Moon," which is cool. Actually, I listened to the "Money" remake today, and I can't lie, I'm pretty critical of it. I enjoy the original song a lot more. But either way, I'm glad that he's re-releasing all those awesome songs, and maybe some of them will be improved. But and it's not just, I would go even further and say money is an aspect of capitalism and a representation of labor, but the accumulation of money and wealth inequality and the lust for money results from the relations of production at the core of the system, the relation between capitalist and wage labor, and just the commodification of everything, the turning of everything into a commodity or something to be exchanged on the market makes it so that you can buy anything with money, including, look at what's going on with Jeffrey Epstein and all these rich people who are pedos. Like you can literally buy anything with money in this system. And, the root of all evil in a capitalist class society is that relationship between capitalist and wage labor that allows money to gain its dominance and be perpetuated as the universal equivalent and be accumulated by the capitalist ruling class.
Yeah, there's a reason we always say value is alienated human labor, right? And value is only realized in currency and what we call the value form, the form value takes, money, right? I don't know that it's the root of all evil, but it is the point of exploitation in our era, which, if you ask me, is pretty evil. All evil is just that sort of metaphysicizes it, right? It takes it out of its time and place, not to get all like, well, actually on you, but I get what your point is, Wormy, and thank you. It's a good point.
That's an interesting word, metaphysicize it. It sounds like a philosophy sparkling drink. Metaphysi, baby.
That's I'm gonna get my own seltzer.
Metaphysics.
Like these seltzer companies should start paying me advertising money. I swear.
That's what I'm saying with my energy drinks, dude. Like, where is Monster at? Actually, I think Monster's owned by Coke. So my dad drives truck for Coke. David sent us 3 super chats back to back to back. $10 each. Holy crap. Thank you so much, David. David's given so much to the project already.
We love David. Thank you, David.
Our original Patreon supporter. So someone who's been with us since the beginning. So it's your birthday too, David. Celebrate you today. Thank you so much. Feliz aniversario.
That's 350 days of Duolingo for you right there, right?
Yep. Now I know how to say anniversary. I didn't know it before, but yeah, I hit 301 or 302 today.
Awesome.
Getting better.
Thank you so much, David, brother.
Yes, thank you, David. Appreciate the crap out of you. Battle Cossack, another one of our most consistent super chatters from Argentina, I believe. Speaking of Spanish, have you heard of a Ukrainian journalist claiming that Putin was a cannibal who ate brains? Sounds like something straight out of South Korean propaganda against People's Korea. Yes, I haven't heard that, but it does. It does. It's funny how they repeat the same propaganda talking points or get so ridiculous, you know, when they're trying to create a boogeyman, when they're trying to create the bad guy who we all need to go attack, need to send the military after. They'll go to the most absurd lengths to, like, we say they try and portray these people like Putin, Saddam Hussein, whoever that they're trying to destroy, or Gaddafi, as comic book villains, and like, it's serious. Like, that's literally what they're doing. Like, there was one North Korea article where they said Kim Jong-un was like having a pool filled with sharks, like a James Bond villain, and throwing people into the shark pool. Like, they're literally trying to make people think these are Hollywood villains. And then, you know, Hollywood plays the role too of brainwashing people and making you think that there are comic book villains in real life.
Yeah, I'm constantly, anytime someone is like, well, but aren't they all above authoritarian? I'm like, dude, like, do you think the world, like, sit and think, do you really think the world is a cartoon? Because that is the picture that you're painting here. When I had someone tell me about the anti-aircraft guns that Kim Jong-un used to kill a person in free Korea. And I'm like, think about that, man. How is that? How do you think that's true? And it's the same thing as like when we'll talk about the Marxist position in the proxy war against Russia is the side of Russia. Well, there's no gray area here, right? That's the anti-imperial struggle. And they'll be like, but isn't Russia this authoritarian hellhole and blah, blah, blah? And you, like, every time I'm like, okay, how do you know that? Like, tell me three political offices in Russia. And of course they can't do it because the cartoon doesn't have those very easy things. And I'm like, don't you, like, just look at how the things actually function. And these cartoons fall apart really easily.
And I think just a part of why so many people are acceptant of this is because, you know, in some cases at least, there's not much skin in the game, or at least I don't see that there's much of their skin in the game. And that's what our duty is, you know, to support these anti-imperialist struggles, not out of like some vague moralism, even though it could be present. We can think of it as morally correct to be consistently anti-imperialist and not like an anti-imperialist in hindsight, to use Eddie's term. But our task is to show our working class why it is in their self-interest to be anti-imperialist. And this is, you know, Marx is very clear in his writings on the Irish question that, you know, the British workers condemning colonialism in Ireland is not a matter of vague moralism. It's a matter of their class interest. It is in their self-interest to do that. And now we're back at Gus Haw and his critiques of petty bourgeois radicalism, and a phrase that comes from Noah's excellent paper for the second the second issue of the Journal of American Socialist Studies, where he updates this analysis and says that you can have the best idea in the world and bring that to people, but if they don't see their self-interest in it, they're not going to follow you. And that's why we have to be able to connect like the struggle against imperialism all over the world to the conditions of our working class here at home. We have to connect our class struggle in the national form that it takes in our country to the class struggle that's waged by our ruling class against the working classes of the world.
Absolutely. I just want to say in relation to the DPRK thing too, it's so like it doesn't pass the stiff test, the common sense test. Like the DPRK is under an embargo, and we hear in the US media all the time, oh, they're so poor, oh, they don't have any resources. Like, oh, they don't have any resources, but they can set up shark tanks to throw people in, or they're going to waste their anti-aircraft ammo on, executing people when they could just poison them or shoot them with a pistol or whatever. Like, come on, this doesn't make any sense. And I wonder if they're going to stop trotting Yeonmi Park out there, because I mean, after she was on Andrew Schall's podcast, I talked to a lot of my friends who are into comedy about it. I'm like, do you see how ridiculous this stuff is? Like, just think about the stuff she's saying, and kind of logically broke it down for them. Like, do you think that people in North Korean hospitals can really live on a diet of rats? And then the rats eat the people, and the people eat the rats, and it's an endless cycle. Does that sound like it makes sense within like the laws of physics and everything about reality? Is that possible?
It's never possible.
Of course
Before we get off this subject, this Doran Popa asked, maybe we should contact some Russian Marxist comrades on the question of the Ukraine war. It will give you more nuance. Plenty of nuance. You can look at all of our stuff on it, but the KPRF, the Communist Party of the Russian Federation, has a ton of stuff on the war. Go to their website. I think it's kprf.ru. It's very informative and will give you all the nuance you need on this anti-imperialist struggle. For Americans, it is a proxy war that our ruling class is waging for economic reasons. And what does Lenin teach us about such a war? That defeatism towards our government is the Marxist position. Not that we just blindly listen to Lenin, but he lays out why. And these reasons are the same. We don't have to go through a whole thing. We've talked about this 1,000 times. Go to a YouTube search, Ukraine Midwestern Marx, and you'll find 1,000 videos from us.
And our website, we've published probably hundreds of articles by now, and we've published English translations of the stuff that the Communist Party of the Russian Federation puts out as well. But, to circle back to that great point that Eddie made in talking to his friends that listen to comedians and just asking them, like, do you even think this is like physically possible or biologically possible? That could end up having an effect, and usually does, the same effect that, like, when the church was proven wrong about their, human-centric, earth-centric worldview, it caused a crisis of legitimacy, because they're supposed to always be right. And when there's such a big thing that they're wrong about, it opens people up to, delegitimizing the trust that, or removing the trust that they have in these institutions and the claims that they make. And that opens up a space for us to say, hey, extend this, not just in these narrow areas that you have it, and extend it to everything. And when we were organizing for the Bernie campaign, that was one of the quickest ways that we got people on board, specifically like, students and younger people that came from like rural working class backgrounds that had gone with Trump because they saw him as like draining the swamp, or, being this sort of vague anti-establishment candidate. we got them to flip to the point where like a good 70% of the socialist club was like previous Trump people. And we did that because they had already in their mind, Trump's big thing was fake news, fake news, fake news. And I was like, yes, it is fake news, but all of it is fake news. It's not just MSNBC and CNN. It's or it's not just their comments on Trump and on Trump related things. It's like their comments on everything, and Fox's comments, and it's also the historians and what the historians tell you about socialism, and a lot of the independent media. And so you start to open up their worldview, and once there's a crack, the whole thing is a lot easier to open. And it's like that. I gave an example of this, like strong fiber paper, where if it's not broken, you're not going to open it. But as soon as you get some scissors and you give it a little slit in the tip, you can break it up and with fairly little strength. So I think ideology works in a similar fashion. Once it breaks through one time, it's very easy to continue your work and change that person's worldview.
For sure. Carlos wrote a book relevant to this. Thank you for the super chat, Justin Watson. I don't even remember what we were talking about when you said Carlos wrote a book relevant to this, but yeah, probably talk about the purity fetish and the crisis of Western Marxism, which I don't have next to me right now, but is a fantastic book that's relevant to a lot of the things that we discuss. There you go.
It's
Available on
under my
MidwesternMarx.com.
camera right now where I'd grab it.
So thank you very much, Justin. Happy birthday. Who was your guys' favorite or least favorite guest that you've had on? That's an interesting question. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat, Eli. I guess we can go around the circle and answer this. My favorite guest was probably Rockhill the first time. I wasn't even there for that. I was at a wedding, and I was a few beers deep, which possibly made me enjoy it more. But yeah, it was that was a really good one. I had struggled forever with this, what on TikTok was being called postmodern neo-Marxism. And there were this group of people calling themselves Marxists and mocking Marxist-Leninists for being Marxist-Leninists and calling it too simplistic and too stupid. But I could never get them to actually explain what they believed. I could never actually get them to say, this is what postmodern neo-Marxism is or whatever. This is what. No, they just called it neo-Marxism. I'm using Jordan Peterson's term, but they could never actually explain to me their positions. They could never explain to me why they don't support China in any kind of coherent way. And then to see Gabriel Rockhill break down the Frankfurt School and break down all these neo-Marxists or postmodernists who are really just, CIA ops in a lot of cases, or are, indirectly being propped up by the CIA, State Department, by Capital, ultimately. Seeing that was like the final piece in the puzzle for me, as far as knowing that I was a Marxist-Leninist and exactly, what my positions were on most things. So I would say that was one of my favorite. Having Radhika Desai on was great. We've had a lot of good ones like that. My least favorite would probably be some TikTok kid that we talked to a while ago, and we decided to not even upload it. The guy, Carlos, he was not smart. We had him on, and Carlos was a little bit of a dick and didn't basically stop talking to this guy once he realized that he was stupid. And then after the stream, I was like, what the heck was that for? That guy has 170,000 followers. And Carlos was like, what? He has 170,000? I'm like, yeah, where the hell do you think we were talking to him? But that guy sucked. We should have never had him on in the first place. It wasn't worth it. I don't have to say his name. He can remain anonymous.
My favorite is Tony Montero. We love everyone at the Saturday Preschool, and I don't know, he's just so personable and kind and brilliant. And I mean, you think we're into Du Bois. That guy is a treasure chest of Du Bois. So, and just the history that he can tell us about this movement both nationally and internationally. I mean, the man's given speeches in the Great Hall of the People in the Soviet Union. That's huge. I mean, he was in a capital study group with Fred Hampton, right? He's been around. He's got stories, and he tells about, Henry Winston and his relationship with his mother, and just like really interesting things. Yeah, so every time we talk to Dr. Montero will be great, or is great. I don't have a least favorite. Maybe the times I have to be home by myself.
Yeah, and that's not the guess. It ends up just being like, but yeah, it's hard picking a favorite because I don't know why, but after we do like a really good interview, I always come out of it like, oh, that's got to be the best one we've ever done. And I've had that feeling maybe uh, easily a dozen to do 2 dozen times. But a lot of the people that we've talked to, it's interesting because the first conversations we're a little bit starstruck. We've been admirers of their work for a long time, and then eventually after like interviews and stuff, sometimes we end up developing good relationships with these people. So um, it's yeah, I can't really pick a favorite. As a philosopher, I guess I would say that the Rock Hill takedowns of both Zizek and the Frankfurt School, and then the French theory one was it's right up my alley in terms of theory. So was the John Bellamy Foster on Lukács's irrationalism. It's right in line with my work, but it's hard to talk about them as favorites because I've also enjoyed a bunch of other ones. Someone mentioned Danny Shaw, and that's a brother now, and we've really enjoyed that one. The one with Dan Kovalek, like we've been covering the proxy war against Russia for a while, but the stories that he was able to tell us of people in the Donbass, you really only get that sort of information when you've done what he's done, which is travel there constantly. I think he just got back from the Donbass again. There's so many conversations that we've had that have been so enriching. And,
Carlos, let me interrupt you real quick. All three of us read this wrong, and and Eli just corrected us. He didn't ask for our least favorite. He asked for at least one of our favorites.
so Eddie threw
Sorry to the TikTok
portrait.
kid that I just dunked on for no reason.
I also wasn't that mean. I was just I was like, what is
You
wrong
weren't
with
mean.
Eddie?
You just checked out of the interview and basically made me talk to.
I
This
was disappointed.
doofus.
I was like, why are we interviewing this kid? Why would Eddie schedule this? I didn't want to be mean, but I was like, so
I did
yeah,
not explain well the context or why we would interview him. This is early, this is like 3 years ago.
Did he just go to like a random high school and ask a kid to do an interview with us or something? What the fuck?
Yeah, I think at the end I'm like, "What college are you in?" He's like, "Oh, I'm a senior in high school." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is just bad."
But anyways, yeah, we've had so many amazing conversations, and they all develop us, and that's another thing. Like, there's no such thing as the Midwestern Marx Institute in the abstract. Like, we're always in a constant state of change, and we've had so many changes since we started. We were the way we would operate at the beginning. We had a lot of like the poke the bear stuff, and the way we would engage in polemicizing and taking up whatever new Twitter debate happened, and being very clearly on one side and not adding nuance. And it was a certain level of immaturity that's natural of a young group, and we had really good mentors and people who helped steer us into professionalism, and that helped to get us away from perhaps more infantile forms of approaching things, and to help us realize that we're building something that's quite big, that's quite necessary in our era, and that it shouldn't be ruined by a a lack of professionalism. So we've have struggled for the last 2 years and some change to try to be as professional as we can, um, and to be the best version of ourselves, and to try to be above the bullshit, and to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and participate in critique in a way that's mature, even while we have been shit on, slandered by a million and one people, with people contacting friends of the institute and people in the institute, and the amount of things that they have done to the institute to try to sink it, the lies that have been shared have been tremendous. And if there's one thing that you guys can confirm, if you've been following our project for a long time, is that we don't step into those problems. And a lot of the people that have done that, with time, they've changed, and a lot of them are now, people that follow the institute, that spread our stuff, and that have usually apologized for the lies and slanders that they have shared. And we've never gone on tirades against people while having all the right to do so, because lies have been shared about us as individuals, about our
So
institute,
many lies.
an incredible amount of lies. And uh, we're trying to build a sort of atmosphere where we not only educate people in terms of politics and ideology, but also in terms of character. Like, how can we be better communists? How can we comport ourselves as communists and develop a communist virtue ethic, and be the sort of people that others want to emulate, so that even if we're at a workplace and we can't convince in the first conversation our coworker to accept socialism, they at least can say, that guy breaks all the stereotypes I've heard about communists. He just breaks them down. This is a great person. I want to be like him. Even if I'm not a communist, I want to be like him. And eventually, they'll come to understand why it is that we comport ourselves like that. And that's one of the things. There's a few things that I think that set us apart. The emphasis on the importance of theory, um, uh, the way we comport ourselves with others and people we disagree with, or overcoming the purity fetish, but also, like, at the personal level, trying to be better individuals on a daily basis, and hoping that others can too, through not just us mentioning what we're trying to do and how they should act as communists, but also trying to emulate, like, Noah in that debate with Drew Pavlu, or the way that Noah engages in discussions online, where he's not treating people as if they're speaking in bad faith, and he's trying to help everyone that he can. And um, we would like to have, like, be like Noah, or what would Noah do sort of bracelets. That'll be the next store item that we put up. But um, we're constantly changing, getting better. There's things that we've done in the past that we have come to reject and transform, and seen as necessary mistakes or errors for a more developed form of the institute. And I think a lot of our audience understands that, and that's why they stick with us. And whenever we're wrong, they'll call us out or something. But yeah.
For sure. And by the way, if I get cut off at all, it's because there's a crazy storm in my area right now. And if you hear anything, it's because my roommate's dog is terrified of storms, is pawing at my door right now, which is annoying. But he's a good boy, so I'll let him slide. Yeah, this is actually my favorite guest that we've ever had, Seabass. When he had a mental breakdown during our debate, before he locked himself outside the TikTok headquarters, or handcuffed himself and demanded that I be kicked off the platform or arrested or whatever. That's my favorite. Everybody go watch my debate with with Seabass on Conscious Lee's channel if you want to be mind blown at how much you can break someone just with dialectical materialism, I guess. But yeah, that lots of crazy and interesting moments throughout our history, such as that. I mean, in the Vaush debate and the Drew Pavlu debate being similar, where you're debating just these heinous, disgusting liars, just these total sophists, and trying to approach it, in the spirit of learning and discussion, and try and get something valuable out of it. I feel like those debates really represented like what we're about. Telling the truth and not changing, even in the face of the most odious political actors. But
Yeah.
What's
Well,
your best?
before we get to that, can I add one thing?
No,
Oh, fair enough. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm gonna try and calm my dog down.
I just want to say I can't take credit for the holding ourselves to such a high standard. That all comes from pops. It all comes from my dad, and he would be very, very proud of where the institute is today if he were still alive. A while ago, I wrote a very short article called "Walk the Walk." And it's been expanded since then. So I'm not sure whether it's going to be included in a book or I should just release it on its own. But for me, it's how I try to conduct myself as a communist, and how I think we should, the standard I think we should all go to should be higher than anyone else. And I want to sort of just do a real quick aside and show people sort of what this is like, if that's all right with you guys. Okay, cool. So we got this comment from 0070 Boy, who says, "Oh, look, it's the white guys who crap on a leading black scholar because he destroyed their white fantasy history of the USA. All you guys can do is organize conservatives and reactionaries." This kind of thing really, it genuinely makes me sad, because the way we're taught to engage with each other is not to listen, right? This guy's already convinced of this version of us that doesn't exist, right? The reason that we critique, he's talking about Gerald Horne and his settler colonial thesis rather than class struggle as a premise, right? And instead of listening to the criticisms, it must be dismissed, right? So instead, what we should do is listen to criticisms and figure out whether they're valid criticisms or not. Obviously, this one isn't. We organize all kinds of people. The only qualifier is that they're working class, whether they're from the proletariat or reproletariat. But the reason we criticize Gerald Horne is because he's lying. It's not because, there's some fantasy history of the USA. It's because his narrative doesn't prove his premise, right? So the facts that he lays out, and it's not like there aren't interesting facts in this book. And by the way, it's just this book. Gerald Horne today is not the Gerald Horne of yesterday. The Gerald Horne of the 80s and 90s is a far different man than the Gerald Horne of today. So let's be clear on that. But the premise he has in this book is that the revolution of 1776 was, in fact, a counter-revolution because the bourgeois revolutionaries were afraid the British Empire was going to abolish slavery. There are no facts that lead to that conclusion. There just aren't. The first lie that Horne tells is directly on the first page, where he takes a quote out of its context and actually cuts off most of it, making what was a very anti-racist statement, which was incredibly, astoundingly progressive in 1776 for a white ex-nobleman to have said. And what he does, he cuts out a bit and makes it sound racist, like he was on the side of slavery. He talks about the Sons of Liberty, over half of whom were staunch abolitionists, including the framers of the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson. And yes, I know Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. He was still an abolitionist. If you actually engage with the substance here, read what Jefferson said, read what Franklin said, what Paine said, etc. His narrative falls apart. It sort of plays on the lack of genuine education we have. And that mixed with the atmosphere where we have to dismiss and try to mock each other rather than come to a common understanding so we can all move forward together is a problem. And it is a problem of the middle class being dominant on the left in the last period of our history. If we are working class, that has affected us, right? And we should not let it. We should rise above that and go forward together, because together is the only way we get forward. All of us, all working class people. The idea that the institute that calls W.E.B. Du Bois the father of American Marxism is somehow dismissible because of the skin color of a scholar that we have critiqued is just silly. It just is. And if we dismiss based on some narrative we're led to dismiss, then we're missing the point. Sorry about the rant. I just kind of wanted to get that out.
Well, and I find these forms of race reductionism the weirdest ones, because what they're effectively doing when they side with that thesis specifically is citing against MLK, citing against Baldwin, citing against Winston, citing against Du Bois, citing against Frederick Douglass, and citing against the greatest intellectual tradition in our country that is the representative and the reflection of the most advanced movement in our various class struggles, which has been the Black freedom movement. These people are citing against that tradition when they adopt this thesis that is completely antagonistic and contrary to these struggles, which have been the main form the class struggle has taken in our country. We take our cues for American Marxism. They're all from what we would say are the most brilliant American thinkers in our history. If you want to qualify them as just black thinkers, that's on you. But Winston, Du Bois, Claudia Jones, like King, so it's completely absurd. And
Montero.
Montero, right?
In there. If you think our critiques, if you're gonna dismiss our critiques because some of us are white at our institute, listen to Anthony Montero's. That's what I did. I didn't know much about Gerald Horne. I didn't know what the debate was about, but once it started happening, I engaged with it, and it was obvious that Anthony Montero's was based in fact and based in scholarship, as were Marius Trotter's and other arguments put forth by you guys, and the counter arguments, mostly were just shut up white boys, or Jefferson couldn't have been an abolitionist. He did bad things in his personal life, no real substantive political argument in favor of Horne's, and nobody still, Marius Trotter shows in his article the sources that Horne blatantly and obviously took out of context and used to push his own narrative, and that needs to be explained if you're going to back up his thesis. Like, why do you need to, lie in that way if this thesis is based in fact? So,
yeah, I think, and it's somewhat, it's really, really sad is what it is. What happens is you try to engage and people will take what you're saying and then draw some random conclusion. So when we say something like Thomas Jefferson is a very good example of the dual birth of liberalism that Lucerdo talks about, right? The man that owned slaves who was an abolitionist. And both of those were reconciled within this historical figure. People go, what, are you saying you support Thomas Jefferson? It's always like this extra step. Just like cool down and go from what people say. That's really all we're saying. We've gone over this over and over and over again.
Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Carlos, if you had one final word.
Yeah, just real quick. It's not just the followers and the little cult that has been built around Horne that have those sorts of condemnations that take the form in their head of a defense. Oh, you're just white or whatever. It's unfortunately Horne too, who, no, you mentioned that his work before that was pretty great. I've cited his work on Du Bois and some of the work on Du Bois that I've done. That's one of his first book, and He's done good work on black communists. He's got I believe on Ben Davis. He's got a great book, um, and it's, his what are his responses to these critiques? Oh, this is just the white, I think the white nationalist left or something, like some bullshit term that doesn't engage at all with the substance. Like, they are factual errors that he just does not engage with, and he just dismisses it as just, oh, this is the white left, this is how they act. And when they do that, you're unable to, he muddies the water in a critique that should be made about how it is that at times the socialist and the labor movement has excluded the black proletariat from their thinking, and has excluded the struggle against racism as a central part of its own struggle of labor against capital. And that is true. There has been a problem with, like, the white or the official left, the traditional working classes, and they didn't take up the struggle a lot of time, with the exception of the Communist Party, of the struggle of black labor against capital. They didn't take that up as their own struggle, and that's something that should be criticized. That's not at all in the same ballpark as the people that stand with the tradition that was against that, the tradition of Du Bois and other people who saw these struggles that were central to the Black freedom movement as class struggles, as struggles of the Black proletariat, and who saw the natural ally of the Black proletariat in the poor white and in the white working class person, and who found it a tragedy that, sometimes these spaces were infested with racist false consciousness, but that it's overcomable. And that's the difference between all of these people. It's like their aim is to overcome, when racism has played a central role in dividing the working class, overcome that. Whereas a lot of the stuff that you get now, specifically from the academy, not from grassroots organizations, but from the academy, is nonsense that just aims to divide us more in an era where we can be as united as ever, because the consciousness of the American people is radically transformed. It's not what it was before 1964 with the Civil Rights Revolution. So it's playing not only a neutral or non-communist or non-progressive role, it's playing insofar as it continues to divide the people at a time when we have to unite and struggle against capital and imperialism. It's playing a reactionary role. And that's not to dismiss the fact that his views on the proxy war against Russia, from what I've seen, and his views on China are very positive. They're in line with ours, but in this area, he completely impossibilizes our ability to unite the working class and to struggle at home in overthrowing the empire from within, which is what our comrades from abroad literally want us to do, because it's the biggest factor preventing the flourishing of their revolutionary movements or their successful transformations of society towards a socialism that is currently having to spend most of its energy fighting imperialism rather than constructing internally. So.
Yeah, and we've written extensively on this and published on it. I did a long interview with Marius Trotter about his criticisms of Horn. We've done interviews talking to Dr. Montero about Horn, so there's plenty of that information out there. And yeah, like these guys said, it has nothing really to do with Horn himself. It's the scholarship that we're engaging with, and yeah. What is the best advice? Thank you so much, Wormy, for the $10 super chat. That's huge. Thank you so much. What is the best advice for people new to communism/socialism? I've only been following it for about a year or less, but it's changed my life and absolutely affected my way of critical thinking. Yeah, I would say the same thing. And I've communicated this to Carlos. I'm kind of working on the back burner, and I have been for the last 2-3 years, on something called dialectics of wrestling. Because the sport of wrestling, which I've done my entire life and felt like I understood pretty well, the way I looked at it and the way I approached things changed when I started learning about Marxism, when I started learning about materialism and dialectics. It just allowed me to have a more concrete grasp on things, a more systematic grasp on things, and to not question certain things as much, almost in a way, to not be super anxious about what is the truth, because I feel like now I have a method of finding out the truth, you know, and I know what I know. I don't know what I don't know, but it's hard to explain. I'll write about it in the Dialectics of Wrestling, but yeah, it changes the way that you view the world, including things that you feel like you completely understood before, just because you have a new way of approaching things and a new way of approaching truth. So, and along those lines, what I would say the best thing you can do as a new socialist or communist is study, 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 read, 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 read. Get yourself a book club, get yourself some books, some easy ones, some more challenging and more difficult ones. The German ideology is one you should get if you're just getting started, and read, because you know, theory, and this was the quote on the front of our website forever, you know, theory becomes a material force or a material weapon once it's grasped by the proletariat. And you know, that might not make sense. Like, how can reading these super ancient books help me organize, you know? But it absolutely does. As Lenin said, theory is just the collective experience of the working class taken in general, you know. And if we're not learning from the previous revolutionary working classes that came before us, we're going to continue to make the same mistakes, right? So it's vital that we read what they wrote, the theory they wrote for us, learn from their mistakes, learn what we can do going forward, and come to better understand the world. Like, I used to tiptoe around this issue, but like, the people who are telling you that reading doesn't matter or it's privilege to tell people to read, those people are incredibly misguided. Incredibly misguided. For one, there were, you know, peasants in China who were illiterate, who taught themselves to read using theory, using Lenin's book, you know. So anybody, if they can do it, any American today can do it, for the most part. And two, it's just the most valuable thing you can do. It puts us all on the same page, right? It helps us all answer these questions that have already been answered, these debates that have already been had hundreds of years ago. And it gives us a program or a path forward. So it's just absolutely vital. Without revolutionary theory, there can be no revolutionary movement. I mean, just think about it. Like, why would any workers want us to be in control of the state and be in control of the economy if we don't have a plan, right? If we don't have theory. But if we say, no, here, look at these, you know, pages of scientific analysis we've done of the capitalist system and of our own socialist experiments, and here's our you know, path forward. Here's what we want to implement tomorrow. If we have that all down theoretically, we appear professional, and you know, we'll be prepared for an actual revolution, and we'll look more serious to the workers, right? They're not going to trust some random anarchist just telling them, yeah, we'll take over the government, and then, you know, I don't know who's going to make your glasses anymore. Someone who just likes to make glasses. Or I don't know who's going to make the car. Somebody who enjoys making cars. You know, you need theory. Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm gonna go a step further than Eddie and say we need specific theory. I see this mistake over and over and over and over again with new folks. They dive into capital. And if we don't already know the dialectical materialist worldview, which isn't as scary as it sounds, then we're misunderstanding everything Marx is writing in Capital. We can't understand State and Revolution. We can't understand Capital, et cetera, without that knowledge of what Marxism is and how to understand society and its history scientifically. When we learn the general laws that society develops by, then we can do our own analysis and we can understand what Marx, Engels, Lenin, etc., whomever is saying, because it's very, very easy to get misled, to misinterpret things, because we're not even aware that the Marxist view is different, that it goes from a different premise and understands how the world works on a deeper level than we're originally taught, right? So it's very, very important to learn the worldview of dialectical materialism. Lucky for you, we have for free on this YouTube or whatever you're watching this on, an entire course designed to teach you just that, called Basics of Marxism. We have 2 more classes left in our first run of the course, but it's been huge. And the students in it are picking it up so quickly in a couple of short weeks. They've gotten it down. And from there, the entire world opens up for us. It's only when we learn that we can sort of know what kind of actual real world actions to use. So the theory informs our practice, right? And as we do that practice and the world keeps moving, it keeps building on our theory. The two are in a relationship together. And when we learn the Marxism, it explains why.
I think you guys hammered that the part that I would have taken as the professor. But just on a more basic level, don't get pessimistic. The ruling class is not pessimistic about our capacity to change the world. That's why they spend billions of dollars trying to manipulate us, create fake lefts, and when we start being successful in repressing us, they spend a lot of resources repressing us. So they wouldn't have a massive police state if they weren't scared that at some point us communists can actually grab a hold of the masses in the way that.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but pessimism is so silly when you look long term historically. You know, it's like, as is the end of history theory. Like, you really think we're at the end now? Like, it's so arrogant. Just look at the massive changes in human history, you know, and when in human history have things stop changing and reach an end. You know, that's just being unable to see historical development that came before you and being so locked into your own mode of production, your own way of life, that you literally can't even imagine anything else. Kind of like Mark Fisher's concept of capitalist realism. But, you know, that's something that they try and induce you with, right? They try and induce you with the idea that the status quo, neoliberalism, is the only way we can have it. And you're crazy if you want a radical change to the system. But, you know, in reality, it's not that hard to achieve a radical change to the system. Our ruling class is moribund and decrepit. And, you know, just this week, we had 2 ruling class ghouls, Dianne Feinstein and Mitch McConnell, have like a mental breakdown on Capitol Hill. And Caitlin Johnstone aptly said, you know, it's basically Capitol Hill is basically a nursing home for psychopaths, which was hilarious. But, you know, these people aren't smarter than us. They're not better than us. They just have the wealth and the power and the, you know, the production of information. And they've read bourgeois theory from people like Edward Bernays, who teach them how to brainwash people and control the narrative. But, you know, there's absolutely a way out. We can absolutely sublate the current state of things. So, moving on to this super chat. Thank you again, Battle Cossack. Do you think Poland would go as far as to invade West UA and BY? I think that's what happened. Was that supposed to be an emoji? It's not coming up on the computer. But I don't think so. I don't know. It's kind of weird how strongly Poland is behind Ukraine and NATO, especially given what the Banderites did to the Poles in World War II. Obviously, they were massacred en masse by the Ukrainian nationalists back then. But I don't know. Do you guys have an interpretation of this? I don't know what UA and BY are, unfortunately. I think that might be what happens when you try and type an emoji, but
I don't know what they are either. But I don't think Poland will do that. They're kind of, even if they wanted to, they're hamstrung by the U.S., who doesn't want NATO involved right now. That might West Ukraine and Belarus, he says. Yeah, so I think maybe a year or 2 down the line, but as it stands right now, no, they They are not going to go against the U.S. keeping this a proxy war. The U.S. doesn't. I mean, as our anti-war movement and our workers' movement gets bigger, they're very, very aware of the relationship between that international contradiction and the national one. They don't want us aware of it, but they are. And they know that a full-scale war with American troops going there will turn everyone against them. What little support they have left for this war will immediately disappear. So they are kind of not going to allow that kind of thing to happen. And it's going to be the same with any NATO country, because if Poland goes in, then America has to help, UK has to help, etc. It becomes World War III at that time.
Thank you so much, Ross, the official sugar daddy of the Midwestern Marx Institute, wishing us our third happy birthday, our third anniversary of the founding of the institute, and also the occasion, somewhat coincidentally, of our reaching 35,000 YouTube subscribers, which is of a fairly big merit. Um, we need to pump that up by 10 times. In the next couple of years, we need more of our family members and neighbors to know about Midwestern Marx and the immortal science of dialectical material. I've never liked that phrase. I've never been a big fan, but
You should have heard the arguments Carlos and I had of me calling Marxism a science in the beginning of my beginner's guide book to lead people into the scientific worldview.
yeah, I like sticking with worldview, and I consider worldview almost synonymous with philosophy, like the collection of assumptions that we use to approach the world with, and it could appear in more or less coherent forms. But I like to think that, as Gramsci did, as Aristotle did, as Hegel did, that all men are philosophers, that everyone goes around with a worldview, some of which are dumber and less coherent than others, but they can all develop into more coherent forms. And that's part of the job of what we call philosophers, like people that have sat down to try to make worldviews that are as coherent as possible. But yeah.
People, for me, it's just a quick, like, people's reaction when hearing philosophy or science, and sort of getting to the same area through a different mode. Just in my experience, people have a more positive association with where we're going to go when I say science.
Science of science is how.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again, Ross. And thank you also, Irina Beluzerova. I like it. Thank you so much for the $10 super sticker. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Feel free to ask a question too, and we'll try and get to it since you sent a super sticker. Appreciate that a ton. One sec. I want to see. I wanted to answer this question from Terrence Smith first, but let's do this super chat. The Davey is another super consistent super chatter, financial supporter of Midwestern Marx, always sending in big super chats like his $20. So thank you for real, man. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without you specifically and people like you. So really appreciate you guys. We'll keep pumping out the good content for you, good education for you. But question says, hey guys, congrats on 35K. Thank you. Sorry if you've already covered it. I have come to understand geopolitics very well. Theory, on the other hand, is new. What exactly is the private managerial class? I think you mean professional managerial class. Thank you guys for what you do. Thank you so much. I think Noah or Carlos would be pretty well equipped to answer this question, probably more so than me. I'll just say the professional managerial class is like Kyle Kalinske or the people who fired me from my last job.
Yeah, I'll dish it over to Noah because he's got a whole book developing the development of the middle class of the U.S. and its fall, and So yeah, take it away,
Yeah.
Norm. Then I'll try to add anything after if I can.
Sure, we got to go into history a little bit. The development of capitalism, right, develops. The bourgeoisie actually arises out of a middle class and becomes the ruling class. This requires the creation of the proletariat. And this is a contradiction, right? And it's based around the way society goes about reproducing itself as society. So, and that is the building and the making and trading of commodities, right? We call it generalized commodity production. And so you have the proletariat, who are industrial workers at this time and associated trades that contribute to the value embedded within a commodity that is owned by the bourgeoisie, right? This is a contradiction. The professionals existed back then too. There were doctors, nurses, lawyers, etc., that weren't bourgeois, right? But they certainly weren't proletarian either. And they were part of what we call the middle classes, the classes that exist between that general contradiction of society, which is bourgeoisie and proletariat. Over time, the economy changes. Imperialism becomes a thing. The monopoly cartels form. Financialization happens. And at the same time, the technological revolution allows this to take off like never before. And as technology gets more and more and more advanced, we get this whole section of professionals we call the professional managerial class. So all of the managers and lawyers and workers who are not contributing to the value embedded within commodities, but are also not within commodity production and distribution at all. They're professionals or managers, professional managerial. Now, this is only part of the middle classes, right? What's happening in our era is what we call reproletarianization. And this is my theory that I've sort of come to while talking about it with the others at the Institute over the last few years. And basically what's happening because of, I'm not going to get into a whole thing on it, but a lot of these professionals are falling down from the sort of place of stability that they used to occupy to the exact same location that the proletariat was back in the day, where they're unable to accumulate any forms of stability. They can't buy a house. They're in debt. Their paycheck is only enough to buy the necessities of life, etc. And so this is the reproletariat. And some of them come directly from the PMC. I know that was a big, long rant, but that was the sort of theory behind all of it.
Thank you so much, Davey, for the question. And I think it's a very important question. And often we bring up the PMC, and it's sometimes done in a negative light simply because of the influence that their social consciousness plays on leftist organizations and parties. And to be honest, it's not the contradiction we have with them, or that the working class has with the PMC, is not an antagonistic contradiction. They're as much a potential ally of the proletariat as they are, an enemy, insofar as they side with the bourgeoisie. And I would say that this phenomenon of the death of the middle classes, reproletarianization, has made them more and more and more and more potential allies of the proletariat. And however, there's some issues that are at play in their social consciousness that have to be addressed, but they're not addressed through condemning these people, or calling them parasites, or whatever the case might be. They're addressed in a different form, by explaining the material conditions which allowed them to develop, and also how their ideological consciousness is a product of that. Because one of the things that traditionally middle classes, specifically the professionals, the intelligentsia does, and this is something that Gramsci gets very well, is that they think of themselves as not only a class, but a separate class divorced from history, right? They're able to almost trace themselves back to the scholastics and to, the Greek philosophers, and they ahistoricize a position which is very much historical. So if we're able to capture like the material conditions out of which their class position arises, the ideological reflection, and forms of thinking and relationality and aesthetics, so ways of engaging with the world and relating to other people, that they have, and why at times that conflicts with working class people, to the point where, the example that Noah always gives, he's asked, why don't you bring your coworkers that have come to agree with communism to party meetings, and his reply is usually because it ends up feeling like a HR meeting, like a human resource meeting, or a diversity, equity, and inclusion meeting sometimes, which is literally the relationship that regular working class people have to the manager class, the class that the capitalists put in play in order to handle their affairs. Because once the capitalists get to a point that they're big enough to not have to like actually be the ones who oversee the factory, they have someone do it for them, and that class that does that is the managers. And it's not that they also aren't in a social position that allows them to vacillate and potentially align themselves with the working class, but usually, when it comes to working people's everyday experience, their enemy usually feels like the manager. Um, so these are all contradictions that have to be addressed, and we can't just gloss over them by saying it's the 99 versus the 1% or something like that, even though that slogan might be helpful for agitational purposes. But thank you for your very wonderful question, and I hope that we were able to help in answering it somehow.
I think that was a good answer. I always bring up too, when you're talking about the managers and the way that they're used as a cudgel, like, the that's a good way to describe it. Like the ruling class, the bourgeoisie, tries to use the managers like a club to beat down the working class. And like you said, PMCs can still be our allies politically, and you'd rather have a communist manager than a non-communist one who kind of watches out for you and has your back against the bosses. But a lot of people, like my buddy at his old workplace, the managers would keep track of how long the guys took on their lunch breaks. Then they take like 3, 4, 5 minutes too long, and they're getting an email from the manager from the HR department. And it's like that creates an antagonism between these workers and their manager. A lot of the people at the last nursing home I worked at didn't know much about the CEO. She wasn't around much, or the owners, but they knew a whole lot about the managerial staff who they hated. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
something that needs to be assessed.
I want to just add real quick. It's precisely what Eddie was just saying, and it's more. It's their entire way of carrying themselves, the way they approach problems, their social norms within these middle classes is often very condescending towards working class people, especially when they don't consider us as enlightened as them. Yeah. And so you ever condescend to a working class guy on a job site, it may come to blows. But the HR way is to sit down and discuss blah blah blah. Right? What I'm saying is one of the best ways to overcome this, because a lot of the reproletariat brings these middle class prejudices down here with them, right? And when they arrive on the left and they're meted in left groups with this same middle class social consciousness and atmosphere, it fits in and reinforces it. And so what the best way of overcoming this is learning Marxism. It's Marxism that can allow us to actually see the ideology that none of us can escape, that affects all of us, from the community we grow up in and the social relations that create who we are, right? We're created by the world around us. Marxism can allow us to recognize what that is. And Marxism, therefore, can help the reproletariat overcome that, because in order to go forward, we're going to need the proletariat and reproletariat both. Just like the Bolsheviks couldn't do it without the peasantry, we can't do it without the reproletariat.
For sure. Yeah, I think you covered that well. I thank you so much, Jamie Brown, for the super sticker, and I saw you left a comment too. I guess we can answer this. Says, tell the kids about Michael Hudson. Absolutely. Thank you for the $10 super sticker. That's awesome. And Michael Hudson is a fantastic economist. One of my favorite works by him is Chinese Industrial Socialism versus American Financialization, or American Finance Capital, or something like that. Basically, just a general macroeconomic analysis of the direction China's been going versus the direction the U.S. has. And why China's been able to industrialize and build up their industrial base, whereas the U.S. has been outsourcing manufacturing jobs, jobs in the extraction industry, different things like this that have been in many ways outsourced to China, but now, wages have increased 14 times in China. China is also creating better conditions for the workers in these industries, and they're investing in those kind of industries in Africa and all around the world. So Michael Hudson's got a great piece about that, and you should be reading his work anyways. I haven't read it yet, but I heard his Super Imperialism book is fantastic.
It is. It's amazing. It's I mean, you should see my copy. This is so noted up.
Yeah, his he also has a great show now with our friend Radhika Desai on the Geopolitical Economy Report, which I try to watch every time it comes out too. So,
Radhika's awesome.
Yes, thank you so much, KP Jen. Congratulations to Midwestern Marx for 3 years of labor to inform and open minds and hearts to hope and for a better future for us all. It's important to also see the heart part, right? It's not just the mind, it's also the heart, the aesthetic sensibilities of people. It's a comprehensive transformation that we're hoping to undergo together as we transform society. Thank you so much to our friends from Orinoco Tribune. Happy birthday, compas, from the land of Hugo Chavez. And I think today is Hugo Chavez's birthday, no? So just such a legendary leader, and really, I think, part of the heart and soul of 21st century socialism, and of adapting to the times and applying this long and rich tradition of scientific socialism, of Marxism, of socialist struggles, of real socialism, applying it to a different era that requires new things, not just copy and paste solutions from 1917 or 1949 or even 1959 with the Cuban Revolution. It requires new things that I think the Bolivarian Revolution has been, at the lead in, as well as our Bolivian brothers and sisters, the Chinese and the Cubans as well, which have always been there. So thank you so much, brothers.
Yeah, Chavez has been one of my personal heroes. People know that. I always list him as one or two when people ask me my top 10 favorite socialists or whatever, just because he's been such an inspiration for me. Venezuela was the first socialist country I studied really in depth. And to see, the history of the revolution, the real history, compared to the one that we get from the U.S. media was incredible. And to see how much Chavez meant to the people in Venezuela. And, this is why my upcoming book about Venezuela is called Why Socialism Worked in Venezuela and We Need It Here Too. Is because there's so many things that we can learn from them, that we can apply here in the United States. Like, obviously, there's no one-size-fits-all model for building socialism, but the coalition that they had of different groups and different socialists, at times taking a more revolutionary route, at other times taking a more electoral route, but always being connected to the union, to the communes, and the people. Is what's allowed the Bolivarian Revolution to succeed and accomplish a lot of amazing things for a lot of people. And, I think it's something that we can replicate here in the U.S. rather than sitting around and crossing our fingers and waiting for the Vanguard Party to come out of nowhere, to materialize out of nowhere. Just educate people, get to the masses, get politically active when we can behind candidates like Cornel West, and use it to build a movement and build solidarity like they did in Venezuela. We have 3 more super chats here. They're flying in. I appreciate that. I just want to answer this.
Before that, Eddie, I just want to say thank you to Orinoco Tribune. So thank you guys.
For real. Thank you, Orinoco Tribune. You guys are awesome. Thank you for always republishing us too. And one of the if you don't know, Orinoco Tribune is an outlet that publishes articles, and I love to follow them and read them. It's one of my main news sources. So thank you guys.
They also do great interviews. I just saw one today that they did with our comrade Jody Brar.
I commented on that earlier. Yes. Carlos said we have a group thread, the 3 of us, a group text, and Carlos sent it in that, and I immediately watched it. It was great. Very, very good. It talks about the unfortunate drama between the CPV or the PCV and PSUV, and the importance of anti-imperialism and the incorrect notions on the topic that Terrence is talking about that go around of the inter-imperialist rivalry rather than a real understanding of imperialism. It was an awesome interview. So informative.
Yeah, I just pulled that up to watch because that sounds amazing. I love Orinoco Tribune and Jody Brar, and what a pertinent or important topic to discuss right now. But I want to answer this because Terrence said he's sort of new to the channel, and this is obviously a very important question that we've done a lot of work on. But it's nice to cover it again, and I think, talking about trying to predict the way that the war will end, I think I'm interested to hear what Carlos and Noah have to say, honestly. But I think it's hard to say at this point because Zelensky is very much like a cornered dog, sort of a cornered animal, and it's hard to predict what he's going to do. It seems that he's trying to pull NATO into the conflict or further into the conflict, or directly into the conflict, which could mean nuclear war and the end of Western civilization as we know it. But Zelensky's looking at the writing on the wall. He knows the U.S. is only using him as a puppet. They don't care about Zelensky. They don't care about freedom and democracy in Ukraine. They care about waging their proxy war. So once Zelensky is no longer a useful tool to the U.S., they'll let him go. They'll let him go to Russia or whatever else. And, there have been like 3 or 4 peace agreements now that were on the table that Russia was willing to agree to. And what those would have done was allow Zelensky to remain in power, but cede the Donbass territories and Crimea to Russia, these areas that, voted and said that they wanted to join Russia. There would also need to be some things like denazification, that Ukraine would have to kick the Azov battalion out, demilitarization, they would get rid of all or most of the NATO weapons, but Ukraine would still be a country, and they would just cede these territories that don't want to be part of Ukraine, or in the case of Crimea, never wanted to be part of Ukraine. But the U.S. NATO sent Boris Johnson to break up those peace agreements, or told Zelensky he couldn't accept those peace agreements, and that they need to keep fighting to the last Ukrainian. And NATO's continued to dump more and more and more money in, as has the U.S. They've continued to be provocative with Russia. They've given Ukraine the go-ahead to hit Russia with drones, which they have been frequently. And they've just escalated to the point now where I feel like it's very unlikely that this ends in anything except for regime change. I think the U.S. is really going to try and push Zelensky to fight to the last Ukrainian, and push to the point where Russia goes into Kiev and topples the regime, or they probably won't topple it and just dip like the U.S. did in Libya. They'll, stabilize it and set up a new government. But I think that we might be heading in that direction. I think there's still time, where Zelensky could say, okay, I'm signing a peace agreement. But I feel like if he signs a peace agreement now, he's got NATO who's going to be like, what the hell, dude? And abandon him and possibly throw him to the wolves. But if he doesn't, then, Russia might eventually get to Kiev and take him out. So that's how I see things going so far. I hope it ends in a settlement. I hope it ends today. I hope it ends, tomorrow. We've been calling for a peace agreement forever, but it's very telling that it's NATO and the U.S. who keep blocking a peace agreement, right? And what do they say? Well, we can't cede Ukraine's territory. They need all of their territory. Well, the people in Donetsk and Lugansk and Crimea voted that they don't want to be part of Ukraine, right? And they were being killed by factions of the Ukrainian military and ethno-nationalist militias for the past few years. So you've lost the right to govern those places, to hang on to those places, right? They need to be ceded. And at this point, of course, Ukraine should cede those territories to end the bloodshed, to end the destruction of infrastructure. And, this is also why the media keeps telling us these lies about Ukraine winning or Ukraine being on the brink of victory, because they want Americans to hope that there's any chance of Ukraine getting Crimea or the Donbass back, which is just completely absurd to the point of being laughable if you've been following Scott Ritter or other military analysts. I'm no military analyst myself. I focus more on the geopolitics and the economics, but even I can tell you and look at how the Ukrainian counteroffensive has failed. There's no chance of regaining those territories for Ukraine. The U.S. is just seeing how many Russians they can kill, and they don't care how many Ukrainians they got to kill to do so. So if you're putting a Ukraine flag in your bio and cheering on NATO, what you're really cheering on is the death of more Ukrainians.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. The point was never to free Ukraine or to give them democracy. I mean, look at the state of their democracy now. It's military dictatorship, suspending elections, killing opposition and jailing them, etc. The point has always been to weaken Russia because our ruling class sees a big confrontation coming. They want the alliance between Russia and China weakened. They want Russia, which they consider the weaker, as weak as possible so that they can't aid China. It's like a whole thing. But what I really think is interesting is how they act about negotiating, right? They begin from an impossible ask that the now liberated free territories that the Nazi coup government in West Ukraine was repressing in Crimea and the Donbass, they want them to return to that repression. And it will not happen. That will never happen. Russia's already acknowledged them and added them into the Russian Federation, right? Not going to happen. Russia is not giving Ukraine parts of Russia. They voted to be part of Russia. They're part of Russia now. And it's exactly how they used to negotiate with the Soviet Union. I remember very distinctly, I was very, very young, but I remember nuclear negotiations, right? And I remember my parents talking about how it wouldn't matter what the Soviets brought to the table. And this was Gorbachev. It wasn't, somebody they would not get along with. It wouldn't matter what they brought to the table. They would always, always say it wasn't good enough. They would negotiate in bad faith to the point where the Soviets would just go, okay, screw it. You obviously aren't serious about this. So they'd walk away. And so then they got to say, oh, look at the Soviets refusing to negotiate as they walk away after that, right? And that's the same type of deal they're doing here. It's wild, the things that a simple media narrative can lead people to believe when we're taught not to question it.
Right. And just to piggyback on what you guys have been saying, how is it going to end up playing out? It's hard to tell, but I think that there's a few factors that are guaranteed. One of which is that it's been a tremendous failure. I mean, from every standpoint, but especially from the military standpoint, if you follow Colonel Douglas McGregor, if you follow Scott Ritter and other of the leading military strategists, it's a huge failure on the military side of things. Another thing is that this is going to be very influential for the 2024 elections. The American people are not in favor of this war. The vast majority of them are not in favor of this war, and that anti-war sentiment, which we have not been able to succeed in channeling it into protest, but it's definitely there. Poll after poll shows it. Is rooted in the fact that the media, I think, has an 11% trustability in our people. They don't trust the media. And why the hell would they trust the same media that lied to them about Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, everywhere? And why would they trust them about on Ukraine, right? So I think the American people are becoming a hell of a lot more skeptical. And the ruling class, if they continue to push it, it's very clear that it's going to be a situation where the American people will elect whoever they think is going to stop this war in 2024. That's my view, at least. Or it'll be a very influential factor.
For
The other
sure.
thing,
Sorry, I just want to add, I was watching Fox News comments the other day, and it wasn't, even a super rah Ukraine segment, but one of the hosts just happened to say, when Russia drops bombs, they're targeting civilians. When Ukraine drops bombs, they never are. And all the comments from Fox News viewers, like, that's a propagandist right there.
Yeah.
How could you possibly even know, Ukraine had no intentions to hurt civilians, but Russia did? Can you read their minds? Like, people are freaking onto it.
yeah, right.
Oddly enough, even on what we consider the right in the U.S., a lot of people are against this war, and Trump has been saying he's against it.
Right, absolutely. And connected to that, it's not just how it's affecting the U.S., which is like the centerpiece in this whole uh, game of geopolitical chess that it's losing very badly, but also Europe, which ends up being, it ends up being put in a very dependent position on the U.S. Its foreign policy and national policy ends up being directed by Washington, and this has not been a beneficiary war for Europe. The European people know this. They've been in the streets in a good number of the countries in Europe, and a good portion of, especially the leading countries in Europe, Germany and others, they had very good relationships with Russia, win-win trade relationships on oil, gas, fertilizer, and other necessary raw materials, which were fundamental for European life and which they've been affected by it. So a product of this war, I think, hopefully, could be the separation of the U.S. From Europe. Hopefully, European leaders come to their senses and realize that just following whatever the hell is in Washington's interest is not in the interest of them. I also want to say that we've already seen security advisors as of the last couple of weeks pivot to making the statement that attention should now be redirected towards China. We've seen leading generals earlier this year mention that we'll be at war with China by 2024. So I see that perhaps the end of this war ends up being the transition towards the beginning of a new stage in the war against China, which will be equally, if not more, destructive and damaging to the world. And if a good portion of the world, which is not included in what the West ends up calling the international community, which is usually just the 14% of the global population that belong to the former colonialist countries. But if a big portion of the world rejected this war against Russia and stayed neutral, which has been the case, it's going to be even greater with China, because China engages in much more international trade than Russia does, and it's much more central to the development of countries in the third world that have been kept poor historically by colonialism and imperialism and neo-imperialism, and that see in China's development and in relationships with China a path forward, and that are not forced, as they have been in other decades, to have only one option, which is the U.S. and neoliberal austerity, privatization, deregulation, and liberalization of their economy in order to engage in global markets. Now they have China. So a pivot to war against China manifested as the transition towards ending the situation in Russia or leaving it behind to refocus on China could intensify this process of destruction of American-led imperialism and hopefully bring about a better world. I think that's what all of us hope. I think.
Yeah, I think it'll take a while, but I mean, everyone, like, the U.S. has been freaking out. The ruling class has been losing its mind. The deep state has been losing its mind. Doing everything they can to control information and the production of information, worrying more about controlling the information war than winning the actual war. And it's gonna, as Carlos said, it's gonna be even harder with China. Like, Americans already kind of have this deep-seated rivalry with Russia that goes back to the Cold War, and viewing our values and our country as antithetical to theirs. Just watch the movie Rocky IV. But it's been somewhat easy for them to cook up a lot of Russophobia, but and boogeyman Putin. But even still, like, there's a lot of people who are against this conflict, or at least against the U.S. being involved. And when they try and do that with China globally, it's going to be even harder. China's the one spearheading the Belt and Road Initiative. China's the one developing these countries. And I know a lot of white Western leftists and a lot of white Maoists think that they know better than African countries about what's best for African countries, but China's helping them. China's not debt trapping them. And these countries know that, right? And they know that the IMF, the World Bank, the US, and the arms of finance capital are trying to debt trap them, are trying to subjugate them, are trying to arrest their productive forces and keep them from developing. Whereas China is doing the opposite. So good luck convincing, all these countries in Africa and Latin America to go to war, go to World War III on behalf of the U.S. and the NATO and the Western finance capitalists, rather than China and their growing alliance.
1000%, brother. I think that China excelled at playing the long game. So it's not even about, just the Belt and Road Initiative. Where the Soviet Union couldn't because of the state of its economy, China has succeeded because of where technology got to in being an absolutely essential part of world trade. It just is. And this is part of their plan, right? Their anti-imperialism, their internationalism is material in a sort of more long-term with Chinese characteristics, right? Rather than the Soviet way, which was amazing and did so much for the world. I mean, what the Soviets did for South Africa alone is absolutely heroic. Funding revolutions, funding our party here. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. China plays it differently. It's more Chinese than Russian, but it's also very effective. And it's getting to the point where China is at a point in time where the imperialism and socialism are switching places, right? And as that crumbles, the imperial war machine has to kick into gear. That's the only way to try to prop it up for them. And so us as communists, our role needs to be really, really focusing on anti-imperialism in the real sense, not in this whole call China or Russia imperialist and say we don't have a position sense, in the sense that our ruling class is getting more and more desperate, and it is our job, our duty to prevent war, right? To think of new ways to organize an attack, not just hold a demonstration. Not that demonstrations are bad, but what happens when Lockheed Martin can't get its factories up and running, right? What happens when Raytheon can't ship things? What happens when all of the technology that coordinates all of their planning gets compromised in some way? These are the type of new things we should be thinking about. Because ending this war, I really think, is going to come down to us, to the working class. And it's going to come down to us finally getting our proverbial shit together and taking the fight to the ruling class. It's time, the conditions are right. And the only way to stop them is to overthrow them. If you're not here to overthrow them, if you think there's some soft, easier way, then get out the way, right? Sit at home and say, we support you. That's fine. But get out the way, because there's an order of things that has to happen here, right? And being this like sort of prancing around middle class organization ain't going to work, right? Things are getting serious. Crises are becoming more acute and getting closer together. And as that happens, war escalates. This proxy war escalated again just last week when they began sending cluster munitions because they're running out of regular munitions, right? And they give you some excuse like Russia was doing it already, when it was actually the neo-Nazi coup government that had been using cluster munitions on ethnic Russians in the Donbass from the fucking beginning. Okay, so that doesn't fly. What we need to do, lastly, is find a way to actually affect an anti-war position.
Yes. Very good. I'll give you. Muy bien hecho. All right, so I think we covered that question pretty good. Very important question, of course. The most pivotal geopolitical conflict right now, or most consequential. This is awesome from Dixon Cider. Great name too. Thank you for the $5 super chat. The bourgeoisie does not like it when Noah raises his pen at revolutionary action. No, they do not. The bourgeoisie fears when Noah lifts his pen. They tremble in fear because they know that such a good point has been made, that it caused Noah to lift his pen. So thank you so much, Mr. Cider, for the $5 super chat. Leslie Watts, $10 super chat. Hold on, I'm going to scream at my dog.
Eddie's
happy
gonna
birthday,
kill that
Midwestern
poor dog.
Sorry,
Jesus
what?
Christ. Eddie's gonna end up killing that poor dog.
Dude, every time I start talking, he hears me in here. He starts pawing at the door harder. Happy birthday. He doesn't have a kennel either.
Thank you so much, Leslie Watts. Happy birthday, Midwestern Marx. Appreciate your words, solidarity. Thank you so much, and we appreciate your following and your viewership of our channel, and of course your donations so dearly. Thank you so much to the comrades at the Fine Art Revolution. $20 super chat. Happy birthday. Thank you.
Thank you, Fine Art Revolution. Last time someone mentioned them, and I checked into it. There's some awesome stuff they're doing. Everybody go check out the Fine Art Revolution. You get tons of pen points for that.
Yeah, they're pretty great. They gave us like $50 last time too at a super chat. So they've been really supporting us financially, and as Noah said, lots of cool stuff on their Instagram. I like every time they leave us a super chat, I like to just mention like the importance of revolutionary art. You know, the importance of finding ways to reach people who aren't reading deep theoretical texts, who aren't reading political philosophy, you know, who aren't keeping their nose to politics 24/7, maybe because they're busy with work, or maybe it's just not something they're naturally interested in, or maybe they don't know how politics affects their lives, even though politics affects all of us, and of course economics as well. But yeah, art is an amazing way to reach people because every human being consumes art. You know, everybody likes music, everybody likes movies. Video games was an idea that we had once. Fiction. Shout out to Ursula Le Guin. So yeah, I like the name itself of the Fine Art Revolution. I really dig. So thanks, guys. We got Shoot is back. Shoot from Vision Quest. He's right now, he got a log over his shoulders. He's walking up the bleachers of the high school, getting ready to take me on. So yeah, I got 2 workouts in. Actually, I only did 1 today because I was exhausted. I got 2 workouts in the past few days. Shoot. I'm grinding. I've got a picture of you taped to my mirror in my bathroom like Rocky did with Ivan Drago, and I just shadow box to myself and scream at the mirror naked every day to get myself pumped up. So yeah, it's on soon. Thank you so much for the $2 super chat.
You
I'll
know,
use that to buy a
I-
treadmill.
I ask Eddie for workout tips all the time. I'm gonna take that scream at yourself in the mirror naked one to heart.
Yes, I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to start posting my workout routines, posting me in the mirror. I do. If you guys want to, I've been posting more workout stuff on our TikTok at Edby Liger. Eddie Liger, 77 kilograms is the full name. So, if you're interested in that, and I post self-defense and fitness videos on our Patreon too. I've also answered a bunch of people who just DM me about fitness tips because it's something that I enjoy and that isn't difficult. It's nice to take a break from talking about politics sometimes and just rant about something that I've done since I was little. But
And
Civilize the mind and make savage the body, right?
yes, sir. Mao Zedong, best
and the
quote ever.
mirror,
Study on physical education.
and the mirror thing, people undermine it. It's not just a luxury. That dog's gonna be on a stick later today. Gonna be Eddie's protein for the next few days. But the mirror is not just like this luxury. It's so important in mind muscle connections. Whether one's lifting, being able to see and like focus your mind in on a muscle is pretty huge. And some of the leading studies in like fitness say that like you could do the same sort of workout, one concentrated on like the muscle and specifically targeting it and growing it, and another just completely disengaged mentally. And the one that's mentally engaged is so important. So and specifically for like shadow boxing, like you're able to see your technique and stuff as well. So it's not just for weights. But yeah, I remember we had a teacher. I'm sure you had him too, Eddie. He had business ethics. What a oxymoronic class. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And he made a comment about like the gym and the unnecessary character of the mirrors, and I was like, you can tell you've never stepped foot in the gym with with consistency. Like it's such an important factor. So yeah, especially lighting. Yeah.
He loved athletes too, so I don't know why he would say it. But I used to I used to go in the gym and I wouldn't look at the mirror because I didn't want to be a tool. But now every time I go to a gym that has a mirror, I'm like, okay, nice. You know, you can look at your form and
that's what I'm doing. I'm constantly paying attention to like the actual motion. You know what I mean?
And I got more into studying, like, I don't know, when you're young and you've wrestled your whole life, you kind of get like, oh, I already know this stuff, or I don't need to like work on my form or nutrition. But now that I've gotten older and I'm still competing, I've gotten way into it, like studying bodybuilders and what they do. And, they're so big on form and there's the biggest thing they say for bodybuilding or lifting weights is the mind-body connection. Or mind-muscle connection, they call it. I don't know if that's what you guys were talking about earlier. It was, yeah. Like Carlos said, you gotta, have your mind and your body be one, and so you can focus your energy into that one muscle or set of muscle groups. And it's dialectical in itself, seeing the synthesis of mind and body, of the mental and the physical. So yeah, very cool.
There's literature. There's literature behind it. I was mentioning it to Noah, but if you could do the same sorts of reps, even the mechanics, but if you do them in a way that's mentally concentrated in the muscle, the result is much better than when you're mentally disengaged and doing the same rep, even if you do it correctly. So again, like all of like the idea that those sorts of things are just irrelevant. It's just the body. Like it presupposes, and I'm sorry to do this, but it presupposes a certain worldview, right? These bourgeois assumptions about the divisibility of like the mind and the body, the res cogitans and the res extensa, and we overcome that, and we overcome that as well in our application of it to sports. And it's not without reason some of the best athletes are from socialist states.
Right, absolutely. And this is it goes back to what I was talking about too with the dialectics of wrestling. Like, you guys are going to get me on a tangent now if we keep talking about this, because it's one of my favorite things to look at. But not only, like Carlos said, all the great athletes like Karelin and Ismael Barrero and Mijan Lopez Nunez from Cuba and the Soviet Union, just these absolute monsters. But I've even heard Henry Cejudo say this, who's a Mexican-American wrestler and MMA fighter. I've heard Conor McGregor say this, that their skill and what got them to the top was their ability to connect their mind and their body when it mattered. You know, when a lot of people shut down in those big moments, or your mind goes crazy and you're not able to access your normal physical gifts. I've been there plenty of times where you just kind of have a mental freak out. They have this ability to connect mind and body, to have this mind-body connection that they almost call like a flow state when they go out there to compete. And it's really interesting to study. But like, you listen to the Russian wrestling program, like they have that down to a science, right? They're teaching their guys this. They're teaching them tactics for focusing the mind, controlling their body with their mind when they compete. And it's no coincidence that they have the greatest wrestling team of all time by far. And, they're good wrestlers almost always seem to be able to perform. They never have these bad tournaments. Like you see all the time in wrestling, and the top seeded guy or top ranked guy won't place at a tournament. He just has a bad day. Doesn't really happen in Russia. It does, but it's much more rare. You have all these athletes in Russia who are 7 to 12 time medalists, world medalists, whereas in the US, a lot of times, like, you're at the top for 2-3 years and then someone else takes your place. In Russia, you get these people who just learn how to focus the mind and body. So got a little off track there, but it's great stuff to talk about. One of my favorite things to talk about, and I'm sure it relates to people who play sports, like shoot here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, I just wanted to thank Yogi Bear. Oh, I thought that was a Yogi Bear. It's an anime thing. I don't know why I thought it was Yogi Bear, but anyway, dare to struggle, dare to win. You bet. Very inspiring quote. Super big super chat there, 1949, almost $20. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I thought that your avatar was Yogi Bear. I'll find whatever anime that's from and I'll watch it for you. But thank you so much.
Eddie, real quick, while we're still on the sports and things, Harold Dogbot, not to mention Soviet hockey players. Yes. Firzov and Bolvarov, had posters on my room when I was a kid. Good stuff.
I love it. I will literally talk about socialism in sports with you guys all day, or neoliberalism in sports, because socialism is popular in non-neoliberal countries. Wrestling is so popular in non-neoliberal countries: Cuba, Soviet Union, Iran. Whereas in the U.S., we love spectator sports with just a few athletes that are only available to the elite of the elite once you graduate college or high school, and whatever can bring in money. And then, like at the Super Bowl this year, they were playing the national anthem while they had military jets fly above the stadium, and one of the coaches crying, he's bawling, at this display of American militarism. And it's just, there's never been a more obvious moment where I'm like, I love football, but it is brainwashing people into capitalism and American exceptionalism and imperialism, as this coach is crying at the military jets. But and that's something we would make fun of the DPRK for, right? Like, their people are so crazy, they cry when they see the military. No, that's America.
That's the essence of super patriotism. It has nothing to do with any working class traditions. It's just a form of false consciousness that gets often people from working class communities to identify themselves with this military that brings nothing but death to our brothers and sisters abroad, and that's tied to sending our brothers and sisters at home to their deaths or to their mutilations, mental and physical, in character abroad, to kill and fight people whom they have more in common with than the pieces of shit who send them over there, and whose interests are really the ones that we fight for in these wars in order to enrich them. So,
yeah, that's why it kind of drives me crazy when people will call American veterans horrible, right? Like, why are you hating your brothers and sisters in the working class, when you have a real enemy to fight, get your head on straight. There's a ruling class sending them there and making our lives conditioned in such a way where that is a reasonable option for people, right? And almost some of my best friends are veterans. One of them was in the invasion of Iraq, right? And it affects you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You're never the same. And he said many times that there's a reason they weren't allowed to go talk to regular working people there. Because you find out real quick that you got a lot more in common with the guy on the other end of the gun than the guy giving you orders.
That's that great Black Mirror episode where they they show that they had to put something on the minds of the soldier in order to see the people as zombies, because and it's based on statistics that a lot of, I think it was like 80% or so of people, I forget in what war, they were shooting over the heads of the enemy because they didn't want to kill people. The Second World War, they didn't want to kill their enemy, and you know, this dehumanization of the other is such an essential component for how it is that the ruling class gets us often to end up fighting our brothers and sisters abroad. And it's done with every war. Now we're seeing it. We've seen it with Russia. It's the dehumanizations of Russia have been insane. Of Korea, you know, of free Korea, non-colonized Korea. It's so ridiculous, and we have to fight back against that. It's on the basis of that dehumanization where the rest of it is legitimized, because you end up not dealing with humans, but with these pariahs and animals and barbarians or whatever the hell it might be. And it's deeply rooted also in this long legacy of using racism to justify colonialist expansion and capitalist enrichment of a few.
Right. And I got to bring it up just because I know someone will take this extreme example. Like, obviously, there are war criminals like, you know, Eddie Gallagher type people who, enjoyed the killing and lost themselves in the super patriotism and committed horrendous crimes. I actually don't. Eddie Gallagher got absolved of this stuff. I don't know exactly what happened, but he seemed like a sketchy dude. You know, there are people like that for sure. That's not who we're talking about. But if you speak to veterans, the vast majority of them are not like that, especially the young ones. You know, a lot of the young ones had no idea what they were getting into, and then they got shipped to Afghanistan. They're like, oh my goodness. You know, some of the stories that my buddy told me about Afghanistan, I don't even want to repeat because I don't want to get in trouble. And like, it's mind-blowing stuff about the extreme level of corruption and what they were doing to keep the fighting going so they could continue to make all this money off the opium fields and off the sale of weapons and the maintenance of military bases and like these tourist shops that were set up on the military bases, which Nick Terse writes about in a really good book called The Complex. Talks about how Apple and all these, and Starbucks and all these companies we don't normally associate with the military industrial complex are making money off of these wars. But I mean, one of the things, my buddy showed me a video of them shooting someone with white phosphorus, right? The U.S. has invaded countries or tried to invade countries because their leaders are using chemical gas, they tell us. It's specifically white phosphorus. And I always think, I'm like, I've seen a video of a U.S. troop hitting a civilian with white phosphorus for no reason, right? But we're going to invade Syria because they might have used white phosphorus. Like, it's just insane. But yeah, so people get ripped out of their high schools and sent to fight and die in these wars, and people with no future or no economic stability here at home, and they're promised economic stability. It's a trap. You know, poverty is the new draft, as is propaganda. So to just, you know, hate these people or dismiss these people who've been tricked by the propaganda, I get why you might be tempted to do that, but it's not productive. You know, we need those people. The soldiers were part of the Red Army during the Russian Revolution, right? It was the soldiers who didn't want to fight anymore, who didn't want to be sent to fight and die in World War I, after previously fighting in all these wars of accumulation and expansion for the Tsar, for the monarchy. So, yeah, we should probably run through these super chats. We got so many more. I know it's getting late for Noah too. I don't want to hold you up till you pass out, Noah, but
open secret, I go to bed very early, but I promised these guys yesterday I would stay up and do a late night stream. At like 8 o'clock, I'm texting them like, I ain't gonna make it, guys.
I had a feeling. I had planned for that. I know that how hard it is to do that when you're waking up as early as you are, but I think this is my favorite comment we've ever gotten. Eddie and Carl's yell sexy as hell. Thank you very much, Somyash.
Thanks.
Yeah, Noah's a little bit
Somyash.
hurt by that. Can someone please send Noah a super chat, like a $6 super chat that says he's sexy as hell? He needs this right now.
We all know I'm just the ugly old man here. It's fine.
Just wait till Carlos and I are 40 and 300 pounds, and then we'll see who they like.
I drink too much to stay in shape, so that's very likely for me. I'll have a big old belly gut, and hopefully it's like the Roscoe Dash belly, where it's like buff on top, but like big, almost pregnancy belly at the bottom, and maybe I can fit into it and look good with a big old beer belly, but I don't know. Or I could just stop drinking, which is not gonna happen.
I'm worried too. I'm so used to being able to eat almost whatever I want because I work out 1 or 2 times a day really hard. Like, I don't know. I might have to keep working out that hard till I'm 80, but I've watched my dad. He can't work out the same way he used to. So maybe I'll get chubby at like the age of 50. Thank you so much for the super chat. Christopher Romero, another one of our super consistent super chatters. Appreciate you, Christopher, as we also appreciate all the other super chatters. Again, our project, everything we do would be impossible without you guys. It would be impossible without the Patreon supporters, the YouTube members, the Twitch subscribers, and the YouTube super chatters. So thank you all so much. You are fueling our project, and every super chat is motivation and resources to put more stuff into educational content. So appreciate you. Happy birthday, and a big thanks to everyone at the Institute. Thank you. Question: is the shift of American social consciousness being reflected in our consumption or interpretation of media and entertainment? Wow, what a deep and insightful question there. Is it being reflected in our consumption? Absolutely. I mean, and this is what I would say. In a lot of ways, the ruling class is trying to take the media that we consume, or take the revolutionary sentiment in the working class and sell it back to us as media. Like, there was a Fred Hampton movie that recently came out, and they mentioned that he was a communist, but obviously it wasn't a movie telling you to go overthrow the government and establish a dictatorship of the proletariat. It was a movie to make money and, probably make I haven't seen it actually, but make Hampton look less revolutionary than he was. And you have movies like the Barbie movie that was supposed to be this big feminist message or this subversive message or whatever. Obviously, it's basically a giant toy commercial from a corporation. They're selling it back to us. So that shows that the revolutionary sentiment is there. But it's even more important to read theory, for one, and two, recognize and call out what Gabriel Rockhill and Carlos and Noah have called radical recuperators. These fake leftists, these people like Vaush who say, I'm super radical, come to my positions where we support NATO and, condemn any kind of revolution ever. They love the aestheticism of being radical, or the aesthetic of being radical, without the substance, right? And that's what the bourgeoisie loves, and that's what they'll try and sell us in the media, and especially with entertainment media. I mean, yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
There's always some revolutionary way to end up having the same concrete things happen in the real world that the bourgeoisie want, right? Always with every fake leftist you'll ever find. For going all the way back to Trotsky. Sorry, I had to. I think this is a really deep question. Now, what do we mean by the shift of American social consciousness, right? Because there's two parts to this. There's the change in bourgeois ideology, uh, going out of the old overtly white supremacist form, right? Uh, After the civil rights revolution forces this from below into the new wokeism, right? Which is a bourgeois reflection of the changes the civil rights revolution brings, and it still inherently holds on to the ideological assumptions of the old, but it's all in a new form, right? At the same time, we're entering a revolutionary era. So the working classes, the proletariat and reproletariat, they're shifting too. And at the same time, you get technology and the general progress of society moving everything forward. Affect media in even just that ideological, more subconscious way. And we see that with the movies listed, right? That Eddie just talked about, like the Fred Hampton one, etc. And it affects the way we see that, of course, because our general ideological sort of infection, what infects us, is different, right? And changes. But at the same time, there is this very, very purposeful misdirection of possible revolutionary energy. And it is that place where we need to live, basically. We need to focus our attention on why we've gotten to this place where they can get millions of dollars from this Barbie movie by presenting it as this incredibly empowering for women thing, right? When it's the same old thing, just repackaged. I've actually seen the movie. It's a pretty good movie. I liked it. It has a few really good parts. Like the Ryan Gosling playing Ken and him dressing like Sylvester Stallone with no shirt and boxing gloves and a fur coat is awesome. Like just objectively awesome. And they make fun of some funny things. There's even a part where Barbie quotes Marx, believe it or not. But at the end of the day, it's part of that whole misleading. I think of it often as in if we're going down a path to being a revolutionary, right? And there's this general path in society. I think of it like a river, right? There are different nets that get thrown up that can hold us back from that view, that progress towards being a revolutionary, right? Like social democracy's one, the welfare state's one, wokeism's one, racism, oldie-timey racism is one, the new woke forms of racism are another, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we need to be able to know what is ideological and what is natural progress and what is fraud.
Yeah,
you gotta lie just to make me feel better.
That almost makes me feel worse. This is patronizing.
but, if I could just say a couple things about it, and it was a very good question. Eddie, if you have a chance, pull it up just so I could
Gotcha.
reread it. But yes, I agree with both of your statements, and that really reflects the fact that the material conditions have changed, and because these have changed, the consciousness of the people have also changed. They're more attuned to injustices, and the bourgeoisie has to make the way of attaining consent, the way of achieving hegemony, it has to make it more nefarious. It has to make it more, let's see what the word would be. It has to be more elaborate in its crafting of a narrative that suits its interest. And this was something that was already really predicted by Lukács, and specifically in the form that it takes with bourgeois theorists and ideologues, which is that in order to defend capitalism and the existing order, it's not enough to have a direct apologetics a la PragerU. You need indirect apologetics. You need things that appear as if they're critical of capitalism, but they're missing the whole substance that a genuine Marxist analysis can bring to the table. They're missing the systematic analysis. They're missing the fact that there is a way out, and that the way out is through the working class organizing itself in a revolutionary fashion. The way out is not spontaneous outbursts that are not organized, that have no theoretical clarity. The way out is represented in the forces that are still demonized in the media, even when they produce a somewhat radical message. So that's one of the things, and that's what I've called in my work a controlled forms of counter hegemony. And we're seeing a lot of that in film. We're seeing a lot of that in culture, and we have to be able to call it out when we see it. Another part, because you mentioned consumption, and we've been talking a lot about like media consumption and Hollywood consumption. In terms of general consumption of like food, and there's been a change in the population where the same things that we see in other areas are reflected there, where people want to consume ethically, right? And what's happening, and this is a point that, to quote someone that, not quote, but to reference, who came up with it first, and, I wish it wasn't this person, but he did. Slavoj Žižek, I think, captures this phenomenon very lucidly, which is the fact that today you go into Starbucks, and already within the purchase, you have a portion that's donating to a good cause. And that's something that's being added to a lot more of the things that we consume, to our coffees, to our foods, to whatever it is. And what that ends up doing is packaging within the act of consumption itself, within the commodity, your dissenting, right? Your activity against the system is packaged already within a commodity within the system. And that's very powerful, because otherwise we'd feel guilty about the things that we're consuming, and we would recognize like dissent taking the form of us going out and doing something directly against the system. But if you're drinking a cappuccino and a percentage of it is going to some fucking place to fix some issue that capitalism created, which in reality is not being fixed, but you're being told that it is, you're that other activity that you would have otherwise done, it's almost incorporated within that commodity, and you feel good even as if you would have done something else. And maybe I'm not putting it as clear a way as possible, but there's a way in which dissent that otherwise would have been outside of the structures of commodification has been itself commodified, and people end up having that feeling goodness that they would have had with revolting against an existing order that's disgusting. They end up having it in the experience of participating in the existing order and in consuming commodities, because the Starbucks comes with a donation to X, Y, or Z place, or because the eggs that you got, the farmer grows a new tree or some fucking bullshit. So again, it's a making of ideology and forms of ideological control more elaborate. And that means there's improvements in some areas, and other areas where it makes it a little bit more difficult for us to decipher the real from the phony, and to get people to understand why is the thing presented to you, even if it makes you feel good, and like if it's, oh my god, it's super radical. What about it is a form of radicalism that helps to reinforce a conservation of the status quo? Because the status quo, as I'm forgetting the person that wrote the book, but the book The Leopard, there's a quote in that novel where it says that in order for things to change, in order for things to stay the same, they must change. And that's what capitalist ideology has realized. It's had to change and adapt in order to remain essentially the same, capitalist imperialism. So we have to be able to call that out. But yeah, sorry, this has been like a 20-minute rant from all of us for this one super chat.
Really good question, honestly. So thank you very much, Christopher, and thank you for everything that you do for us at the Institute. Appreciate the crap out of you. Did you guys see Oppenheimer, and how do you guys view Oppenheimer's legacy from a Marxist perspective? I didn't. I watched some of our buddies, Estarbach and Marius Trotter, like broke it down. I watched a little bit of that. They were talking about, and I was researching this too, reading about Oppenheimer. When the movie came out, he ended up getting targeted by the Red Scare and by McCarthyism, And he wasn't a communist, more of just a liberal, but he ended up becoming pretty critical of the ruling class and everything that went on. So maybe Carlos and Noah can speak to this more than me, but yeah, I think he's an interesting figure. I'm interested in watching the movie. I like Christopher Nolan. He's one of my favorite filmmakers, and I heard the movie only uses practical effects, less VFX and CGI, which I think is really cool. And there's a lot of stuff with science and physics like in his head, I guess, where they use all practical effects. I just think that kind of stuff is really cool. I really like the movie The Thing, is that's what it's called, like old John Carpenter movies where it's all like clay and practical effects. I'm into filmmaking. I think that stuff is pretty freaking cool. So I'm excited to watch that just because it's a Christopher Nolan movie, but I've heard historically it's not bad, and Oppenheimer is an interesting figure.
He's very interesting. I don't know a lot about him, but I know that the general, the politicization, or the realpolitik behind actually building the bomb had multiple layers to it, that they needed to undertake this momentous weaponization that could destroy all life on Earth because the threat was that bad of the Nazis. But at the same time, the Nazis weren't ever the real threat, as we know. It was the communists. So if you look at that and then how they treat Oppenheimer later in his life, once he becomes a sort of liberal activist against it, it all makes a lot of sense,
Yeah, and insofar as he ends up becoming an anti-war figure, in the broadest version of an us statement, he ends up being one of us, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for the question, Ben. I haven't seen it yet. I'm hoping to go see it with my wife maybe sometime this weekend. Eddie, I think you're muted.
My bad. Yeah, that might make a good Marxist movie review, honestly. So yeah, thank you.
We'll do
Carlos,
the trifecta with the three of us. We'll do that, Barbie, and Sound of Freedom.
Carlos' technique is for libs. Is that what Shoot says? Shoot only did one move, only one technique, the lat drop, which is, I don't recommend trying to wrestle if you only know a lat drop. You're not going to go very far. But in Vision Quest, it looks pretty good because your opponent goes flying when you hit a lat drop. That technique is for libs. That's not true. The Soviet Union was really good at the lat drop, but Carlos is the guy who taught Loudon Tai Chi in the hotel room. Have you guys seen Vision Quest?
No.
So, my theory behind this scene is in the hotel room that he's talking about with the Tai Chi is some people think, especially in the 80s, people thought wrestling was gay, right? It's two sweaty guys in a singlet grabbing each other. So there's this scene in the movie where Loudon is working at like a hotel and he's bringing this guy room service. Loudon's the main character. And the guy's doing Tai Chi. He's like, oh, yeah, this helps relax me. And Loudon's like, oh, can I use that for wrestling? He's like, yeah, let me teach you. He starts showing the guy Tai Chi and basically like makes a move on him, like tries to get with him. And Loudon's like, get out of here, man. What the heck? I don't swing that way, man. Then he leaves the hotel and they never, ever discuss the scene again. So rewatching that movie with my buddies in college, I'm like, I bet you they just put that in there so people wouldn't think wrestling's gay, right? So you have the main character explicitly say, no, I am not gay. So then when he's touching people in a singlet later, nobody can accuse him of being gay. So yeah, Carlos apparently is the guy who was teaching Tai Chi in the hotel. No, Carlos is the Loudon's friend on the motorbike. That's Carlos's character. My profile picture is a kami animated series out of the Philippines. Oh, badass. Nice. The only kami animated series I've seen is The Leader, which is the Chinese animated movie about Karl Marx. That's honestly badass. That was like the first way I really learned about Karl Marx's like personal life. So it was a great way to do it. Happy just got my copy of Jazz Volume 2. Excited to read it. Wow, thank you so much. Bought Jazz 2 for about $5 to $10. I don't know what it is now. And you sent us a $10 super chat. So you basically doubled your purchase of Jazz 2 there for us. Thank you so much. Appreciate the crap out of you. All the purchases of Jazz and our published works, of course, are reinvested in the Institute and reinvested in producing more educational work. But I really hope you enjoy it. I think, the first journal was amazing. I think the second journal was even better. I'm very proud of the article that I have in there, and we're all pretty self-critical and harsh on our own work, but the article that I have in Jazz 2 and the article that these guys have, I'm really proud of, and I think they're really worth reading. Mine focuses on American healthcare, which it's such a great explanation of everything wrong with capitalism and the commodification and privatization of everything. And the way that our ruling class uses the healthcare system to produce surplus value. It shows, my analysis of that shows how exploitation works on a broader scale and how innovation is prevented by capitalism, how corporations, wealth and control of markets has been concentrated into their hands, which they look to maintain, and how that makes life worse for the rest of us and straddles the rest of us with debt. So thank you so much for buying Jazz 2.
Yes, thank you so much. And we just opened up the call for papers for Jazz 3. We've already received quite a few really good ones, and yeah, it's that paper that you did on a historical materialist reading of the American healthcare system is just phenomenal, and so is Noah's paper updating Gus Hall's petty bourgeois radicalism critique to our era, and my paper ended up becoming a part of the last chapter of the purity fetish and the crisis of Western Marxism. So yeah, it's I'm excited for this third volume and to get working on it and to work with a couple new designers that we have on board now. And it's I always think that not just the articles, but also the fact that we mix in pictures and cool designs. That's something that gives it a big plus. And now we have a couple more designers, so maybe we can mix up some new things this time around. But yeah, thank you so much for buying that, and I hope you enjoy it.
For sure. J Flow Grappling Academy. Always great to see other grappling communists. I tell people though, at like every wrestling tournament for the past 2 years, almost everyone I've had someone come up and say, "Are you Midwestern Marx?" I say, "No, Midwestern Marx is our collective, but yes, that is. I am the Liger portion of Midwestern Marx." So, and I always ask them, are you enjoying the videos? Do you like them? Are you a Marxist? And it's just yes, yeah. It's awesome. So, more and more communists and less conservatives in the grappling community. You just love to see it. But thank you so much. $20 super chat. That's huge. Thank you so much. Super chats are coming in like crazy today. This is awesome. Thank you all so much. Cool to see that the Institute means so much to you guys, that you're willing to give your hard-earned cash. A lot of you guys are exploited like crazy by your bosses at work, and just saving up any money that you have to give to the Institute. We really appreciate it. We don't take it lightly, and we use that to motivate us and to produce good educational content. But the Wachowskis said The Matrix, the Wachowskis are the writers and directors of The Matrix, was an allegory for the alienation of labor under capitalism, base and superstructure. The base equals machine, masters versus human slaves. Superstructure equals the matrix / capitalist culture or false consciousness. Very interesting. I mean, I didn't know that they had said that explicitly. That's very interesting, but you could definitely imply that, in the Matrix or a critical review or analysis of the Matrix. I made a meme today that was like, taking the red pill or whatever, the pill that helps you see things for what they actually are, that helps you see through the propaganda, is voting for Cornel West and moving towards socialism. It's become like a meme now, but it is like you see at the beginning of that movie, the world is just really crappy. everyone's alienated from each other. You feel kind of uncomfortable even watching it and being in that world. They're just living to go to the club and do drugs in the amount of time that they're not working, and then they take the pill and they can see things for what they are. And when they see things for what they are, they realize the world is run by the robots or the aliens or whatever. Just kind of like when you read Marx, you see that the world is dominated by the ruling capitalist class and we need to take them out. But is it better to live just consuming from day to day, getting drunk to forget, what you do during the day and forget your life, before going back into the rat race, the exploitation, the alienation? Or is it better to see things for what they are so you can fight against the horrific ruling class that's holding us in this position? Of course, as Marxists, we want everyone to take the red pill and see things for what they are. But interesting read of that movie.
I always heard that it was an allegory for becoming class conscious, right? As Neo wakes up, he gains his class consciousness, he loses false consciousness. But if this is all like actually more deeper than that in base and superstructure, I think this makes Neo Lenin, right? And Morpheus would be Marx.
Marx.
Yeah, Marx.
You guys are gonna hate me for it, but when I first read it and I did a presentation on it in undergrad, I read it through like an angle that saw it as a kind of Cartesian route. Like, how can we really know that what we consider to be reality is guaranteed? If his argument is that you've had a lot of dreams where you felt like you were awake, and then you realize, oh, I was actually sleeping. So there is no guarantee that what we are experiencing as reality is reality. And that's how I had always read the Matrix. But I kind of sitting here and thinking, holy shit, it fits so perfectly into like a Marxist critique of the system. It was one of those things where very early on, I first saw the Matrix when we were reading Descartes in undergrad. So it kind of just stuck with me, like, oh, it's a Cartesian film. And thank you so much, comrades from the Grappling Academy, for helping me see that it's also a deeply Marxist film too. I wonder if that's why Cornel West gets involved in the later versions. Did you guys know that?
Huh?
No.
In the Matrix, I think it's Matrix 2 or Matrix 3.
No.
Yes, dude. Let me see. Cornel West Matrix.
Are you pulling like that reporter a while back who got Lawrence Fishburne and Samuel L. Jackson mixed up?
No,
Morpheus is
man.
Lawrence Fishburne, right?
No, not fucking Morpheus. Look at Cornel West.
Oh man,
Matrix
yeah.
Reloaded.
Very cool. I didn't know that.
Nice. Maybe Americans will vote for him now. They freaking love their celebrities. So,
did he take the red pill in the movie? I don't remember that one.
I haven't seen it after the first one. It kind of goes to shit.
I saw the most recent one. I went to go see it with my son. It was fun, but like I didn't really know what was going on. So,
can't win them all. Happy birthday, says Ben. Thank you very much, Ben. $10 super chat. Appreciate that so much. Got a lot of Bens in the audience, but you're our favorite because you just gave us that super chat. Just kidding. No, sorry, Ben W. What? Ben 10. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I can't even remember what that's from. It's just like
the show.
It was a cartoon.
It's a cartoon where he morphs into different animals. There's supposed to be 10, but then there's like 400 by the end of the show. He can become like anything. But thank you so much, Ben. Appreciate that. Thank you for being with us on the third birthday of Midwestern Marx. 2 years ago, I thought I was a centrist, then got some reality knocked into me in part because of this channel. Thank you guys. I'm sure I'm not the only mind you have helped change. Wow, that's, as we were saying earlier, one of our favorite kind of comments to get. Means so much to hear that. Thank you so much for the $10 super chat, which also means a lot. But yeah, and we that's the goal of our project, is to change people's minds, to bring people to socialism. And you say you got some reality knocked into you. I mean, I'm sure there were life events too that pushed you in this direction, right? And when those life events or economic events or whatever were hitting you, Midwestern Marx was there to give theory, right? And that's why we never give up on people, right? Why we don't cancel people, why we don't dismiss people. Just keep educating them, keep educating them, keep educating them. You never know when it's going to sink in. You know, sometimes people need to hear things from different voices. That's something that I've noticed as a wrestling coach. You can tell a kid something 1,000 times and he doesn't get it. And he hears it from someone else and it sinks in, or at a different point in his life and it sinks in, right? People are complicated and they learn in different ways. And there are so many people who came to socialism through an event, through some sort of tragedy in their life, or through something that helps them realize the irrationality and, you know, inhuman nature of the capitalist system, exploitative nature of the capitalist system. And this is one of the best things that the Bernie campaign did, for all its flaws, mistakes, and things that we've openly critiqued. But they had us, and I'm sure Carlos remembers this, they had everyone tell their story about how they came to support Bernie Sanders, right? And it was basic. Almost everyone's story was, oh, my mom needed health care and couldn't get it, or, you know, my dad lost his job and lost all his benefits and it put my family in a terrible situation. All these different things that people are afflicted by under capitalism, and push people towards socialism, towards the Bernie campaign. And all these socialistic economic policies like Medicare for all. So many people are changed by an event in their lives, and you know, you need to be ready to meet those people with education. And yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do. So thank you so much for the super chat. It means a ton.
Thank you.
Is Noah talking?
I was, yeah, but that's okay. I was just saying thank you, everybody. We really, really appreciate that. I know, like, we go on and on, but without that, the institute has no money, no funding. We can't actually produce things. It's essential to what we do. So thank you all. We love you all.
Someone said the other day, like, why is your PayPal in your bio? Get a job. And I'm like, well, first of all, almost everyone at the Institute has everyone at the Institute has another job. None of us are able to do this full time, although we would like to. But also, like, what I responded was, where would you rather us get our funding? From the Ferris brothers or from the Koch brothers, like PragerU? You know, all these outlets have funding. All of them are getting paid to produce what they produce. Our funding just comes from the working class. Our funding comes from our actual viewers, who we know are real people that don't have gobs and gobs of money that sitting around, but are taking a piece of their measly wages and, you know, giving it towards us, because they know that's going to further the class struggle. That's going to further the theoretical and revolutionary education of other people in our class. So we're proud, very proud, that our funding comes from, you know, small to medium dollar donations from you all. That's not something that we're ashamed of. So appreciate the crap out of you.
Hells yeah, we are. And there was someone who said earlier that what is this, communists getting donations and blah blah blah, like selling books? Like, yes, someone has very, very wildly misinformed you on what communists are.
Right. People just don't know what Marxism is. The capitalism creates the tools of its own destruction, like computers and the internet. You know, as capitalism develops, we can use what it creates to sow the seeds of its sublation into a new system. So yeah, people need to read Marxism. It's not puritanical.
The workers make the computer, not the capitalist. You dumb Eddie, what are you saying?
No, Bill Gates created my computer using his big mind.
You know, have you ever heard these statistics where, like, it's it's financially not worth the effort of him like bending down to get like $5 or something, or
Yeah,
$10.
yeah.
It's so insane. Like I love and hate the reality that it exists, but you listen to those statistics and you're like, holy shit. Oh my god! It's important to see it as an effect of the relations of production, not as like the center of the evil. You redistribute all of that, and if you keep the same system, it just happens again later on in the future, because that's the tendency. But um, yeah, that's pretty wild. Hazen also sent in another question here. Thank you so much for the another super chat, Hazen, $5. Messed up the first super chat. Do you guys know any Guatemalan Marxists?
I do not. I do
I
not.
know a little bit about the history of the coup of Arbenz and the subsequent horrific repression of indigenous communities and communists. But currently, no, we unfortunately haven't been able to connect with any Guatemalan comrades.
Hope to in the future if you know any and you want to point them in our direction or um, point us in their direction. It'd be great to learn about. Our Benz himself wasn't. We've talked about this. He wasn't a communist, and the areas of the United Fruit Company's land that he wanted to redistribute to the peasants and working people were plots of land they weren't even using. Right, plots of land United Fruit wasn't even using productively, but any land redistribution, couldn't be allowed. So the CIA called him a communist and had him overthrown. He was later found boiled to death in a bathtub. But one of the first coups in U.S. history or CIA history, which went on to be like the blueprint for a lot of the coups that they would carry out. But unfortunately, don't know any Guatemalan Marxists, but I'll keep my eyes peeled for some. Send us an email if you know of any that you want to put us in touch with.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Five Heads, another consistent super chatter and supporter. Thank you, the Five Heads. Looks like from New Zealand, sending a $10 super chat and a YouTube member, which is what that little mark to the right of their name says. They're to the right of the money there. So really appreciate you for being a YouTube member. By the way, $10 YouTube members get a copy of Carlos's book, The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism. It's in our community tab. So be sure, if you're a $10 Patreon supporter or YouTube member, take advantage of that. I wouldn't want you to be paying full price and not get to read that incredible book that's going to help us all organize socialism in this country. But Super Chat says, congrats on 3 years, comrades. Probably the last stream I'll be able to watch for the next 5 weeks because I have unpaid placement. Keep up the good work. Love your work in socialism, James. Well, thank you so much, James. We'll be sad while you're not here the next 5 weeks. We will miss you. And sucks that you have to work unpaid. What a scam that is. Just like unpaid internships are just a scam, a way to get free labor. Should be freaking illegal. But either way, we hope you the best. Hope it goes well for you. We appreciate your support, and we'll keep working to get socialism so you don't have to work for free anymore.
Absolutely. It's almost like a modernized indentured servitude of sorts.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's any good papers or works on that. But and it's a big part of like corporate culture. Such a big part of it.
I read one years ago that was comparing it to the old guild system. And it was saying how we seem to be coming full circle. And it reminded me actually of Fourier, right? In his circular version of history, where as it gets rid of the history and things just keep repeating after everything. Marxism would add that we're seeing a new form of this old social relation on a higher stage of development, but it is essentially the same thing. They're not there for their room and board. They're not there for their wage. Even if they get paid minimum wage, they're there for the training, right? And really, they're there to have a piece of paper saying they went through the program or connections or whatever.
Right. And that's, I think, one of the things that these people that they get characteristics that reappear in technological form that were similar to feudal forms, and they say, "Oh, it's techno feudalism what we're seeing now." And it's like, no, it's not. The essence of capitalism is still there, and then part of the central essence in feudalism, you don't have this insatiable profit drive to accumulate uh, capital and to make more and more profit. That drive is not there in feudalism. It develops when it develops into capitalism. So like Netflix having like these rental systems for their content, that's not feudalism. Like the essential logic is capitalism, even if it's got characteristics and elements that were in feudalism that get brought back at a higher form thanks to the technological revolution. But we have to be able to distinguish like what's the substance from just a mere assertion about elements that are similar to other systems. Like the substance is still capitalism at a new stage, at the stage of the technological revolution and of neo-imperialism at the highest stage of imperialism itself.
And the age of reproletarianization. Don't forget that.
Look at this guy using his own concepts.
I didn't think you were going to put this one up.
Bro, I just read the last line. I was like, why? That one's pretty normal. And then, nope.
I'm sorry, I pulled it up.
Shapiro, he finally listened.
We pull things up with like the super chats to read them. When we pull them up, we don't usually like pre-read them. So, oh god,
Pretty freaking hilarious. Thank you, Ben Shapiro.
Mm.
And this actually happened. This is true. This is the real Ben Shapiro. So,
you know, I read a book. His cousin is a comedian, and she writes for like comedy TV shows and stuff. She's a very, very like sock them liberal, like Kyle Kulinski type before he suddenly, you know, gave up on all of his sockdumness and just said he loves Joe Biden now. But she was saying that because she's broke, she's like, you know, comedy writers, especially like in New York, make nothing. And even their anyway, but she's always broke and would always hit him up for money. Just because she liked the idea of borrowing money from him with no intention of paying him back. And then later saying that's capitalism to him. She's like, no, you entered a contract with me. You didn't sign any terms that say I couldn't change the contract.
voluntary contract.
Yeah.
That's capital. I love it. I'm screenshotting that super chat right now so I can put it on my personal Twitter because it makes me laugh. I never want to forget that. Thank you, Ben.
Oh god.
Thank you very much. Well, did you guys have any? We finally made it through our like 40 super chats. Thank you all so much. I would go through everyone who sent one, but there's just so many. Appreciate you all. Appreciate your support always over the last 3 years. You know, some of you guys have probably been with us for a year, 2 years, even 3 years. So really appreciate that. You guys are obviously in it for the long haul. Can't imagine how much that we've all learned together in that time. So we're really creating a community of learners here, as my 5th grade librarian would have said. But it's quite true. I don't know why I just became unfocused there. But yeah, do you guys have any topics or anything you want to hit before we call it a stream? We've been going 3 hours. I'm sure Noah's about to fall asleep in his chair. But yeah, or if anyone has any last questions they want to shoot at us, now would be the time. We'll answer them. But thank you for 3 years of awesomeness.
Before we go, I just want to say it's an honor to be able to work with 2 of the best people I've ever met in my life, and everybody else at the Institute. Don't forget them. It's not just the 3 of us. And it's an honor and a privilege to talk to everybody who helps with our content and watches it. and attends the classes and everything. It's amazing. I'm eternally optimistic anytime I interact with you guys. Onwards to socialism, right?
Absolutely. And it's not, like you said, just us three. We have so many talented writers, and I mean, Tom's been such an important force in our development and counseling, and he's published, I think last time I checked, close to 1,000 articles for the Institute. So such a consistent writer, and we've seen the development of so many young writers, work themselves into who they're going to be as a writer and develop, and it's been excellent. So I'm looking for many more, not just years, decades, and it's going to be a turbulent time, I think, in the next year. So hopefully, when we do our fourth anniversary stream, there will be some good news with Cornell West. Hopefully, we're in some turbulent times and we're able to reflect the objectively revolutionary conditions in a revolutionary movement that I think has potential of taking root with the Cornell West campaign. Hopefully, we can get ourselves involved in there. We have some good friends already who are, so all forces need to go, I think, at this moment behind Cornell West's effort. And yeah, I mean, incredibly grateful to all of you, and yeah, thank you so much again to all of those who watched the stream, and to all who were able to donate to the Institute. Without you, our work would literally be impossible. So
Yeah, as would, I mean, I want to too, because Noah made me think of it. Like, thank you guys, especially thank my brothers Carlos and Noah and everyone else at the Institute, because we were talking today about how we've been able to walk the line that we've walked, and of course we've made mistakes. We're human beings, and we've tried to correct those when they've been made, but I feel like we've done a good job of staying focused on the goal, of revolutionary education, not getting caught up in opportunism or grifting or senseless internet debates, and as Carlos said at the beginning of the stream, that was something we had to learn how to do with time in many ways. But what I said today when we were on the phone was that would have been impossible if I didn't have these two, if I didn't have a collective since day one, right? Which shows why collectives are important, groups are important. And I'm not saying I would have ended up like Vaush if I didn't have these guys, but it would have been much harder to navigate the political left or socialists or the online education in the online political sphere. It would have been, I'm sure I would have made countless more mistakes, and when I did, I would have been freaking out by myself about it with nobody to talk to. So can't thank these guys enough, and can't thank you all in the audience enough. For, I hate to even use this word because this is what shitlibs do when they're canceling people, but holding us accountable, in a legitimate way, not just, telling people you're holding them accountable when you're just canceling them and screaming at them. But appreciate you all, appreciate everyone at the Institute, and just really happy today that we've made it 3 years and that we've hit 35K.
absolutely. Well, without further ado, then we can roll ourselves out the same way we came in, with the beautiful and immortal tune, The Internationale.
Cannot be solved without a radical redistribution economic power.